All right, good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this November 22nd, 2022 meeting of the Albemarle County Planning Commission to order. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in the hybrid meeting are posted on our county website, on our homepage, and on our calendar. Participation does include the opportunity to comment on those matters for which comments for the public will be received. So when we do our public hearings, we usually recognize the people here in person first, and then those who are waiting online second. So if we can have, is Carolyn online, just to check?
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Yes, great. Carolyn, can you call the meeting to order, please?
Yes, I'll call the roll. Mr. Missile,
Here. Here.
Ms. Firehawk,
Here.
Mr. Carazana,
Here.
Mr. Bivens,
Here.
Mr. Murray.
Here.
Thank you.
One more.
Present, Mr. Claiborne.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Claiborne. I'm so sorry.
I thought you were my friend.
All
Yes,
right.
I am your friend. I'm so sorry.
I know it's a shock, but we have everyone here, full quorum, fully present. So before we begin formally this evening's meeting, I would like to ask for a moment of silence in recognition of those who lost their lives this past week, a week ago, and those who are still healing both physically and mentally. So if we could just bow our heads for just a moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, with that, we have other matters not listed on the agenda for the public. So if anyone would like to speak on a matter that is not on our formal agenda for this evening, could come forward at this time. Okay, I don't see anyone coming forward for other matters, so move on to the consent agenda on the next page, which is the approval of draft work session minutes and draft regular meeting minutes from October 25th. Does anyone wish to pull the consent agenda or to make a motion for approval?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, Carolyn, would you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Claiborne.
I'll abstain since I wasn't here.
Okay. Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Bivens,
Yes.
Mr. Carazana,
Yes.
Ms. Firehawk,
Yes.
and Mr. Missile.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that adoption of the consent agenda has passed with one abstention. I will now move on to the items for which we have public hearings. So the first item we have this evening is AFD 2022-000001 Kritzer Hatton AFD edition. Can we have the staff report, please? Can you move that down a
There
little
we go.
too short to see over it?
Thank you. Yes, this is a proposed addition to the Hatton Agricultural and Forestry District. I'll take this thing off. And you can see here on the map, the crosshatched parcel in the middle of the existing district is the proposed addition, 82.43 acres. I want to make a slight correction to the wording in the staff report. It said that this parcel was previously removed from the district. In double checking the records, I saw that actually only a small portion of this parcel was really in the district before. They are now proposing to add the entire 82 acres. So we're actually increasing the size of the district at this point. The parcel does have 67.5 acres of important agricultural soils and one remaining small lot division right, and extends from here on James River Road all the way down to the CSX Railway just above the James River. To give you an idea of the layout of the property, this parcel and those to the east that are under the same ownership are largely in agriculture and forestry uses, although as you can see around the ponds to the east, they also have a summer camp there that was permitted by special use permit back before this was added to the district, about 5 years before. And again, you can see it runs through this open area and the woods all the way down to the railroad at the southern end. At their meeting on November 9th, the advisory committee voted 6-0 to recommend approval of this proposed addition, and it has to go through this hearing and a hearing with the Board of Supervisors before that action is complete. And I have a couple of motions for you to consider, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, are there any questions for staff or comments? Yes, Lonnie?
So Scott, since there's only one development right left on this property, what is the benefit to the county in terms of conservation of incorporating this in?
Well, the benefit obviously is the limitations on not only on residential development, which there is some. Once they put this in the district, that right can only be used for family subdivisions. There's no other way they can use that. It would also put limitations on any approvals of commercial uses or further special use permits, because that the inclusion in the district would have to be taken into account as part of those reviews. Also, this just helps to fill a hole in the middle of the district and make it more of a contiguous protected area. You know, is this as protective as a permanent conservation easement on the same acreage with 5 or 10 development rights? No, but it does help to some degree. And it does make this a more complete and contiguous district.
And it's a true statement, right? That they could still, even after they join, they could then subdivide that additional development right off.
This parcel or any of the other parcels can do family subdivisions and 21-acre subdivisions while they're in the districts. That's just the nature of the program.
Thanks.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, is the applicant present to make a case or?
I believe
no?
so. Applicants rarely attend. For
I
these
just wanted to
meetings.
check. Okay. I once saw one applicant come and talk about the property. All right, would anyone, so I guess we'll open the public hearing if anyone would like to comment on it from the public. Is there anyone here to comment on this application? All right, seeing no one, we'll close that portion. All right, and bring it back to the commission for discussion.
Madam Chair, could we check online too to make sure whether there's?
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you. Carolyn?
Yes, there's no one with their hand raised at this time.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, that didn't come through.
There's no one with their hand raised at this time?
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
And she usually checks me if I miss someone. She doesn't let me get away with that. All right, so with that, is there any comments by the commission on this application?
I have a question.
Sure,
So-
of course.
So Scott, could you go back to the image, to the what would that call, to the bird's eye view version of this, I guess the Google Earth. So can you share, or do you know, perhaps you don't know, what those sort of beige area in sort of the middle of this parcel, what it was or what it is?
There are a few different open areas. You mean this one here?
No, I mean the big long one.
Big and long one. Oh, this one?
Yes, that one there.
The funny.
As far as I know, it looks like maybe they had a corn maze out there at some point. That's just a guess. I
That's
think
a
it's,
weird
It was the pattern that I was sort of, it looked maybe like that it might have been a recreational use. And the reason I pushed that question on that is that I know one of the things we've discussed prior to this is that there's a category of agricultural land that is sort of pure and perfect, and it needs to be preserved for everybody and anything. And was trying to figure out if this made it there, because it seems like that's just sort of a big open piece of land there, of which I was trying to figure out, wanted to hear what the agricultural value of that was and why we are accepting it back into the ag forestal district.
the districts don't impose any particular requirements about land management or crop production. They function largely through limiting subdivision and controlling to some degree commercial uses. They don't actually require any particular use in the way that, for example, the use value tax categories might for minimum amounts of production for the ag category, for example. So, this particular parcel has got a low impact outdoor recreation area for the camp. It's got a hardwood area. It's got a commercial pine area.
It
There's
looks like forestry.
hayfield at the
lines.
front. I believe there's been a history of hay and crops at the southern portion here. So there's a bunch of different uses on this particular
Thank you.
parcel.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, I mean, when I looked at it, it gave me some pause that someone had taken part out and then put it back, and that was kind of confusing. They shaved off a little piece and then they reapplied to come back in. Is that right?
And I think they were just playing it safe because very small, like under an acre of this property was in the district just because of a former boundary line adjustment.
Okay,
And They
okay,
wanted to be out, do their division and come back. But when we looked at it, we realized it was only that acre that had been in. And it's really over 80 acres
All
is
right.
adding. So we're actually increasing the district significantly with this
okay.
addition.
That was,
It's not
that
just a
was
drop
helpful.
out
I
and come
understand
back.
now.
We have had that happen before, and it's perfectly permissible for somebody to drop out during a 10-year review,
Sure.
do a division that doesn't quite qualify as a family division and then come back. We have had that, but this is not that. This is actually better than that. We're getting more acreage than we had before.
Okay. Thank you. That was very helpful. All right. Yes.
Just for what it's worth, and to echo what Scott mentioned, I attended the meeting on the 9th and there was very little discussion and unanimous support.
Okay, that's helpful. All right, well, I don't think that we have any other discussion on this. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt this addition?
So moved.
Here we
All
go.
right. I
do I need to
I
read
think
that?
that was fine.
Yep.
He moved what we said. So is there a second to that?
Could we clarify, Mr. Claiborne, is your motion to approve the district or?
Yeah, I move to recommend approval of the proposed addition.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing no further discussion, Carolyn, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The motion passes unanimously. The next item we have tonight is SP 2022000022 and SE 2022000047 Verizon Walnut Creek Park Tier 3 Public Wireless Service. I don't know, whatever that stands for. We're ready for the staff report. Mr. McCollum.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Good evening, Chair Firehawk and members of the Planning Commission. Sorry.
It's okay.
My name is Kevin McCollum and I'm a senior planner with the Planning Division of Albemarle County Community Development. Tonight, I'll be giving staff's presentation on the Walnut Creek Park Tier 3 PWSF Special Use Permit Application and associated special exception. To begin, this is an application for a personal wireless service facility, more commonly known as a tower. The proposal is for a 195-foot tall tower on the Albemarle County owned Walnut Creek Park property. The park is located south of the city of Charlottesville off of Old Lynchburg Road. The proposed tower site is near the entrance to the park off an existing driveway that leads to a park maintenance building. When it comes to cell phone towers, there are 3 different types of applications. Tier 1s are antenna that are located within or attached to an existing building or structure. Tier 2 is what we call a treetop tower. Treetop towers are no taller than 10 feet, no more than 10 feet taller than the closest tree within 25 feet. Tier 3 applications
are basically any tower that isn't a tier 1 or a tier 2. They are typically the largest towers or in an avoidance area, which includes a historic district or an entrance corridor. These types of towers follow the legislative review process, which require a special use permit, which is approvable by the Board of Supervisors. As mentioned before, the application is for a 195-foot tall monopole tower. The applicant has also submitted a special exception request to allow the antenna to be mounted 18 inches from the tower face instead of 12 inches. The ordinance allows the top part of the antenna to be mounted 18 inches from the tower and the bottom part to be 12 inches from the tower. This gives a downward tilt to the antenna. The applicant is requesting a special exception so that the antenna are mounted parallel to the tower at a distance of 18 inches from the top and bottom. So at the beginning of the application's review process, the applicant held a balloon test. A balloon was flown at the location and at the height of the proposed tower. While the balloon was flying, staff walked and drove around the surrounding area to get an understanding of where the tower would be visible. Since the balloon is the approximate width and height of the tower, we assume that if you can see the balloon, you'll be able to see the tower. Staff took photos from as many public locations where the balloon could be seen as possible. In this photo on the screen, the balloon can be seen flying above the tree line. This view is from along Walnut Creek Park's main drive and is near the entrance at Old Lynchburg Road. After the balloon test, staff provided the applicant with photos that were taken. The applicant then put together photo simulations to simulate what the proposed tower would look like from those different viewpoints. The map on the screen shows the viewpoints that were used. Photos 1 through 6 are from within the park property, and photos 7 and 8 are from openings along Old Lynchburg Road. A majority of the other surrounding area is wooded, and the balloon was not visible or on private property, and staff wasn't able to go onto those properties and investigate the balloon's visibility. Next, I'm going to show a few of the photo simulations to show what the proposed tower could look like. First viewpoint is the view that I just showed previously. It is from the park's main drive looking west across the field. The balloon can be seen in red on the screen here. And here is what the proposed tower would look like. Next is a viewpoint from the boat landing and parking area within the park. You can faintly see the red balloon just above the tree line. As you can tell, we're more than half a mile or more from the balloon at this point. And again, here's what the proposed tower would look like from this viewpoint. Lastly, I wanted to show a viewpoint from along Old Lynchburg Road. As I mentioned, a majority of the trees and existing vegetations along Old Lynchburg block the view of the tower. But in this example, there's an opening in the tree line or what appears to be a potentially old driveway or farm entrance, and you can see the balloon across the field above the tree line. And again, here is what the proposed tower would look like from this viewpoint. So to conclude, I wanted to briefly talk about staff's analysis of this application. Fully detailed analysis is provided in the staff report. Staff has reviewed this application with all applicable sections of the zoning ordinance, the comprehensive plan, and state and federal regulations, and believe this is a well-sited location for a tower of this size. The majority of the surrounding area is wooded, which limits visibility. All trees within 200 feet of the tower are on the park's property and are protected by ordinance regulations. The majority of the tower's visibility will be from within the Walnut Creek Park property. While staff believes this is a factor unfavorable, we point out that the county is the owner of the park and has provided the applicant permission to submit this application. The only additional visibility staff observed was from small portions along Old Lynchburg Road, where the tower was visible along the road. The views were greatly minimized by existing trees and vegetation along the roadside. Based on the tower view shed analysis, some portions of the property to the west appear to have some visibility as well. This potential visibility is greatly reduced by distance and existing trees and vegetation between the properties and the tower itself. Given this information and the full analysis provided in the staff report, staff's recommending approval of this special use permit and the special exception. The staff recommends approval of the special use permit with the conditions on the screen. Staff's recommending a condition to limit the height to 175 feet. This is because FCC regulations permit the applicant to administratively apply for a one-time increase in height by 20 feet. So if the tower is approved at 175 feet, it can be built up to 195 feet. If we approve the tower at the 195 feet as shown in the application, it could then be built to 215 feet. The staff report explains this in a bit further detail, and I'm happy to answer questions. Additionally, staff's recommending approval of the special exception with the conditions on the screen there. The FCC regulations allow for the applicant to administratively apply for a one-time increase in the size of the standoff up to 20 feet. Since staff believes that this is a concealment element, we recommend a condition to limit the standoff at the proposed 18 inches. Again, if you have questions, please let me know. On the screen here are potential motions for the special use permit. The planning commission is not required to make a recommendation on the special exception. If the planning commission chooses to do so, staff's provided the motion on the screen here. That concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you. Are there questions for staff? Commissioners, no?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Since this is on county park property, have master naturalists or anyone else gone out to look at the place of the tower to go? I assume there's gonna be trees and other vegetation cleared where this tower is gonna be.
Yeah, there will be some trees removed and those are identified on the plans. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I would say, has the county done any survey to make sure that county rare species or habitats would not be affected by where that tower is gonna be? Since this is county property, that's something that it could be.
Yeah, a tree conservation plan will be required prior to the issuance of the building permit. And like I said, there are trees identified on that plan that are shown to be removed. So we have reviewed those plans.
Mr. McCollum, it's fairly close to the edge of the wooded area though, correct? It's not deep into the woods.
Yeah, that's correct. There's an existing access way to a park maintenance building, and it's just located just off that existing drive.
Might be somewhat disturbed already, or was going with that.
Yep.
That's a good question. Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, if not, we're ready to hear from the applicant. And you know the drill, but just state your name and affiliation for the record.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the commission. I'm Lori Schweller, attorney with Williams Mullen, representing Verizon Wireless. And with me tonight is Nate Holland with GDN Sites, who has been working on this project. You will be surprised to hear that I don't think I need to give my presentation. I think that Mr. McCollum has covered everything that I plan to cover in my presentation. And I'd just like to answer any questions that you might have. And I'll add that we are amenable to the conditions that he suggested.
Yes, questions? Yes, go ahead.
I just have a couple of quick questions. One is, did you look at alternative locations and why did you choose this location?
The site is actually the tallest point in the park. And the park then lowers an elevation down to the lake 40 or 50 feet. And so not only the location, but the height is needed to get that coverage throughout the park. It really is a safety issue here,
Right.
just no coverage in the park, and it's needed, on the lake and through the trails. And plus, it's a good location for construction reasons. Already have a cleared, driveway. I think the county preferred that location because it's out of the way of the park and there's already sort of infrastructure for access. The maintenance building is down there.
Got it. That all makes sense. Second question, I realize this is primarily to provide coverage for the park. And absolutely, I use that park a lot and I've oftentimes had some close calls on a mountain bike and looked at my phone and have no coverage. So I'm grateful this is coming. But the other question is, does it extend beyond just, does the range extend beyond the park?
Absolutely. And that's one of the benefits of having it at the top of the
Right.
hill on Old Lynchburg, because you will, and we needed this to get south and, west along the road. So yes.
So the park is the main reason for the safety, but you're also
But it's
getting the
both.
added benefit. If
Mhm.
you were to just focus on the park, would that lower the height of the monopole?
I don't think so. I think, I can't answer that question. I really
Right.
shouldn't. I just know that it's needed for what we're trying to cover.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? Go ahead.
Is that, I know as part of this, the height can be extended without another hearing on this. So is that additional extension going to be needed at some point, do you anticipate, or is that something that could be foregone?
What we're looking for is 195 with a 4-foot lightning rod. And because that's what we need, the county is recommending 175. And then we can have that additional 20-foot extension per the Spectrum Act, the federal law that allows that. And we can do that with one administrative application. So in essence, what's being recommended is what we requested. It's just a 2-part process so that we then can't extend administratively another 20 feet. We can only go to 195.
Thank you.
Okay,
I just want a little bit of additional clarification on the heights, because we get a lot of different heights and other different tiers of the
Sure.
poles. But so what exactly is that additional, we just approved one that was, I think was 148 feet. And now this is another 50 feet taller. So how much more coverage are you actually getting versus a tier 2 or treetop pole? I don't know if somebody else is there to be able to answer that from the.
Yeah, I don't think we have a radio frequency engineer with us tonight,
Yeah,
but
we seem to get, they seem to be growing. I don't know if I'm the only one, but they
Yeah.
seem to get taller and taller. And I'm just wondering, what is the cost benefit? What is the benefit of the coverage area
yeah.
that you get for that additional, 40 or 50 feet?
Well, it depends entirely on the topography and the tree coverage in the area. And so we request the height that Verizon's radio frequency engineers say that they need in a particular location, knowing Albemarle zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan policies. They do know that and have had a long history with the county, but they tell us what they need for each particular site based on the topography. Rule of thumb is that, a tower of this height could extend coverage for 2 to 3 miles, but in some areas it could go 5 miles if there are no obstructions. In this case, again, we're trying to get all the way down to the lake and the boat launch. And so there's an additional concern there. That doesn't exactly answer your question. I realize that.
Yeah.
But it really just depends. Yeah.
It would certainly be helpful as maybe it's something that we can discuss here later, that we get a better understanding of the coverage and then options of multiple towers that potentially could meet that instead of one very, very tall one. So
Mhm.
anyway, appreciate it. Thank you.
Understand. Mhm.
good question, though. I think it's worth asking. Anything else for the applicant at this time? Okay, thank you for now.
Thank you.
All right. Does anyone from the public wish to comment on this application? Yes, please come forward. You come up, just please state your name and affiliation, whether it's resident or whatnot. And then you'll see a light go on when you get started. The green light means go. Yellow means you're almost out of time. And red means it's time to stop. And you might want to tilt that mic down to your height. There you go.
Okay, so my name is Jessica Atkinson. I live across the street from the proposed site, so I'm a resident. I have a few concerns. If the goal is to increase service in the area, I argue that while the proposed site might be the highest in the park, it's not actually the highest in the area. I didn't see any research demonstrating what and where the actual need is in the community, nor confirmation of how much service would be improved. In fact, this seemed to be deferred when I read one of the summaries. So my questions are, where would service be improved specifically, given the topography, and how much it would actually be improved? I think that's important data to have on hand before considering altering the landscape. Similarly, I question the precedent that this construction presents. I do appreciate the diligence on the commission to ensure the height and distance and the being painted brown. I do really appreciate that. I just wonder if parks are now going to be considered open game for more towers. Clearly, the intention of the park, as evidenced by the vision and mission statements by ACPR, is to provide the opportunity to be in nature and enjoy the recreation that nature provides, as well as to be an exceptional steward. So a giant cell tower seems a little inconsistent with what people might expect as patrons in a designated natural area. If the goal is to generate revenue for the county, I'd like to point out in the past 3 years, I've paid $6 for use of the park, despite going almost every day. So traffic has increased exponentially since COVID, but gate fees are only charged in a very narrow time frame across the span of the year. So perhaps that could be evaluated as a more appropriate source of revenue for the park. Related to that, I didn't see much transparency in how much the county will actually be profiting from the lease. So that might be of interest, as well as how those profits will be utilized for the benefit of the park and its patrons. And lastly, and perhaps most personally, despite being one of the 2 mentioned properties in the report, we were not notified of the information meeting that was held in September. And so therefore we're not there. So it was written that there was no community opposition, but I think that's misleading given how few people were given the opportunity to be present. And I just want to clarify that the documents describing visibility to the surrounding areas are a bit misleading. The photos taken were not from the perspective of the 2 home sites listed as being most impacted, which is ours and the Evans across the street. And I can assure you that the visible impact is substantial, and I recognize the need for increased service, and I'm not trying to be a NIMBY here, but I can, nobody wants a giant tower visible from literally every room along the front of our house, and pretty much every place on our property. So that's that. My time is good.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who'd yes, please, sir, coming up.
What are my instructions? Anything?
Just, you might want to raise the mic up since you're a bit taller, and just say your name and affiliation.
My name is Tim Collins. I'm Jessica's husband.
Okay.
I just thought maybe I could elaborate on a couple things. I've been to parks where they have kiosks. If I'm guessing the idea is to generate money. And you could put maybe a 5G tower up down at the lake if you really needed service. Maybe. I'm not technical like that, but this is a pretty big tower. It's kind of a slap in the face, I think, to a park. We spend a lot of time over there, and when you leave the park every night, everybody leaves by dark. You drive up that road and you look to the west. That is like the huge sunset view of Walnut Creek Park. Yeah, and Fred's City Mountain Bikes there. You could attest to that, but that cell phone tower, they show it on perfect blue sky. That's your sunset view when you leave the park. It's beautiful. It's that big field. It should be protected. It's a park, right? So that was something I want to say. And the kiosks that go in park, sorry, I got off track, but you can put a kiosk there, make people pay, make $100 a day, multiple, whatever. We don't know what the money is, but you can start making some money. The park's not making money. So what else? It's these things has been well documented, destroy property values. It's 1,000, if you look on Google Earth, it's about 1,000 feet from our house, 800 feet from our neighbors across the street, essentially towering over their house. Yeah, and so we were never notified. Report states it was no community opposition, this is just wrong, So if that's what you're reading, it's not really fair for you to make a decision on a report that's misleading. And also the balloon test was done in the summer when there's leaves on the trees, so, and Old Lynchburg Road itself is like a gully. It's already kind of protected with the banks of the road. As soon as you step up off up the driveway, boom, you see that ridge line. And I just can't help but think it's sort of a insult to be not notified of a balloon test. And then for them to say that it's not really visible when it's only, maybe in the thick of the summer, it's gonna be a little harder to see through the edge of the road, but right now you drive down there and go do the balloon test now, like have people come look at it again, it's gonna be different. Then, I don't know, I don't really think I have much else to say, but, just. It's just, you look at the principal park, I don't need to tell you all about what Olmsted might think of this, but it's just, I just think it's a bad idea. Especially for a beautiful part. It's like, that's when you leave town, you go for peace and quiet, not towers. So I'll leave it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in the auditorium who'd like to speak to this matter? Carolyn, is there anyone online who signed up to speak?
Yes, there is. Let me promote them to a panelist real quick.
Okay, thank you.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. Okay, this is Mr. Doyle. You have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name, address, and if you're affiliated with a group or organization, and your time starts when you start talking.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, Madam Chair and the rest of the committee. I am Adam Doyle. I own the property with my wife Courtney to the east of the proposed tower site. And I wanted to get on tonight to hear the discussion, as this is also the first open discussion I had heard about it. I was not notified about the initial research period during the summer, as the other two citizens had mentioned. And while I'm not opposed to a safer, better cell coverage, there is a concern, primarily from my perspective, with respect to light pollution. And if there are going to be any, lights or beacons, as this is fairly well along the approach path for Cho. I did hear from the Mr. McCollum, who was very helpful and gave me the information that there was not to be any lighting, but I wanted to make sure that that was, affirmed, and also to kind of, clarify that there are concerns about going, from our perspective, from going to a park in a natural area adjacent to a place where we bought property to get away from civilization, where we would have then a tower visible when there are other ways to build towers. I've seen, and I believe others in the committee probably have seen, towers that project an appearance of a call it artificial tree with limbs or something to the effect that would make it less obtrusive, especially given the height, and particularly with my respect to my neighbors who have direct line of sight vision to it. So I don't have much more to add beyond that. I just want it to be known that we should be looking at alternatives, and if coverage is the ultimate goal, there's other places I believe where this might be more appropriate. But if the safety is the paramount priority, barring any potential revenue, I don't want to get in the way of safety, but by the same token, I want to make sure that we look at all the alternatives to make it as well received to the community as possible. And I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn, is anyone else signed up?
No, ma'am, there sure isn't.
Okay, thank you. No, you just get to talk once. So does the applicant want to come back up and make any final comments based on what you've heard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am sorry if the abutters did not receive notices. Mr. McCollum provided us with a list of all the abutting property owners, and Nate Holland sent letters to all of the abutters. So I can't explain why they did not get notices. We had about 7 people present at the community meeting. So I know the letters went out, and we did have people come. So that's I'm sorry that that happened. I can confirm that the site will definitely not have any lights. Being under 200 feet, lighting is not required. And in terms of the siting and structure, Verizon worked with the county on the location and the siting and the height there. And we worked on what we thought was optimum for the location. I should add, it's important for you all to recognize that under state law adopted in 2020, wireless providers are no longer required, or let me put that another way, localities can no longer require applicants to submit information regarding coverage, such as propagation maps and comparing propagation from different locations and talking about customers and service. All that kind of information is considered proprietary information and is not acceptable for a zoning case. I just want to put it out there because I know that there were comments, concerns about not having that information. We're not trying to be opaque, but that is the law at this time. And let's see. I think one more thing I want to add is that a balloon test is the way that works is we drive around all neighboring roadways. And if anyone happens to be around and invites us on their property, then we will do that. But we do not go on private property during balloon tests, except in special circumstances where we have like it in the Mirador Farm situation, as you're well aware. So where we were invited for their analysis. So we would not know if something were visible from someone's front porch. We only take photographs, or the county takes photographs and provides them to Verizon from public roadways. So we do the best we can. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we'll turn it back to ourselves. We'll close the public hearing and we'll deliberate. But I actually wanted to ask our council a question, Counselor, because something Ms. Schweller just said, and she talked about the fact that they're not required to provide us information on coverage. But I guess my question is, are we allowed to ourselves consider our opinions on coverage in our deliberations?
Right. And Madam Chair, I'm glad you asked that question. It's actually covered in the staff report where it cites the new Virginia code section that addresses that issue. And that code section provides that a locality shall not disapprove of an application on the basis of an applicant's business decision with respect to its designed service, customer demand for service, or quality of its service, or to or from a particular site. So the locality cannot disapprove based on business considerations, propagation, customer base, those sorts of considerations.
Right. Okay. I think I got it.
So because the locality cannot disapprove on that basis, it's probably not a suitable discussion for it would be irrelevant to the commission's deliberations.
Okay, because I know that in a recent one that we approved that would be serving 64, we did talk about the fact that it would help with coverage if people were to say have an accident.
Well, again, what the law provides is that shall not be the basis for disapproval. So.
How many it serves or does not serve?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. Yes, sir.
So with that being said, council, can the community, like if they have a community meeting, can the residents request that? Is that prohibited by law?
Can the residents request what?
I'm sorry, the service information that we're not allowed to talk about.
They can request it, but it wouldn't be relevant to the consideration.
Not for us, but
correct.
Can a community meeting, if there was a community meeting, can folks request it there?
Well, community members can request whatever they want, but the applicant isn't required to provide it because, again, it's not relevant for the consideration of the decision makers.
I think you've answered my question.
Okay.
I'm not asking about tonight though, but thank you.
Okay. comments?
So we're limited to what we can talk in terms of the coverage area and their business plan, but we could certainly talk about the height.
Yeah, the visibility and the impacts
visibility
to the view shed.
And, you know, regardless, I mean, we have no way of knowing how much more a 198, 200-foot tower covers versus a treetop tower, which would limit visibility significantly.
Right. We just know that our county in its comprehensive plan is talked and its guidance has talked about
The treetop,
limiting visibility.
right? And I'm not seeing how this limits visibility.
Now, I mean, I tried to think what could improve upon it in terms of the fact that it is tall. I was thinking of saying it would not be painted Java brown, because that would actually, that only works if it's in a bunch of trees and it's supposed to look like a tree trunk against a white sky or even a blue sky. It would be much more visible painted Java brown. So all I'd come up with so far is that it not be painted and to remove that from item 2D. But the other solution, of course, is to not approve it at all. Because, you know, there's only so much we can do with the tower of that height.
Yeah, if I could just add to.
Yeah.
To that, I think we're sort of caught right between a rock and a hard place here in a sense, because in my mind, you know, safety is an issue, right? But we don't know whether, to your earlier point, a lower tier 2 monopole would be able to cover a substantial portion of Walnut Creek. And whether or not.
Right, whether
the
three smaller
extent
towers
that
could
to
ping
a
a dot,
higher
yeah.
level is benefiting the propagation area beyond Walnut Creek. And that's
Right.
not, so I think if I'm hearing this correctly, our focus is really visual appropriateness, right? The
Yes.
Aesthetic and the visual appropriateness. And just based on that alone, and having, you know, seen the balloon tests, it's really challenging for me to believe that I could approve something at that height.
Yeah, and it is, you know, while it is true that they're not required to provide their business plan, you know, nothing prevented the applicant from saying, well, we tried 3 towers and found that that would be that much more intrusive and require that much more habitat disturbance for that matter. And therefore, 1 taller tower is better than 3. Because we do know that our policy in our county does end up creating the need for more towers, because we can't go very high, so we have to have more towers communicating.
Yeah.
So,
But that, I think that begs the question, and at what point is the tower too high? Because the taller the tower, logic would say that the broader so what point, so we would have to have some kind of regulation, some kind of, you know, as you said, we have our treetop,
right, we
Right.
do have a express guidance,
correct? And this is well above that. So
right?
at what point does a tower become too tall?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is an aesthetic judgment and it's a
Right.
value-based judgment, but it looks to be 2 to 3 times taller than the tree line. And I did note that one of the comments was that considering the artificial trees, I don't know if anyone's ever seen them. They look nothing like a tree. When,
Terrible.
if you want to see one at the Virginia Department of Forestry behind their warehouse, which is accessible to the public, they do have one of those trees. There has been some storms. And so sometimes those giant plastic branches go flying off, which becoming a projectile is unsafe. But they also tend to look pretty bad over time. And they don't look, they're not, you would never mistake those fake
Mhm.
trees for a tree. They just look preposterous.
If I could just, oh, sorry.
And I think the comment that's made about precedent is also very important, because we do have several other parks that have yet to be even developed that are very mountainous. And, you know, this could set a precedent for those other parks. And I also wonder too, that, I mean, would we be thinking about this differently if this was a private property that was proposing the same kind of tower? Would we be saying, would we be judging it by a different standard than we are something that's located on Albemarle County property? And so
Yeah, I'll just say this really quickly. I don't, and because it came up in a number of comments about revenue. None of us know what the revenue is from this tower, and it's not actually part of our deliberation. But I do think that there is a sort of, to me, a higher standard for aesthetics for a park that is a county park that people are objectively going to enjoy nature, because I mean, there's a beach, there's the mountain biking trails, there's Frisbee golf in the woods or whatever, but it really is mostly a natural area. Is its purpose. So I think that does affect what the aesthetics of that experience is. Somebody else
have
have a comment?
one
Yeah.
additional comment. And I guess maybe a comment on that comment.
Okay.
So just one thing, with the awareness of the sensitivity of this county to the aesthetic of cell towers and the visibility of cell towers, whether it's on a private property, on an entrance corridor, knowing that and knowing the amount of time that we've spent as a county to try to minimize the aesthetic impacts and visual impacts, it would seem to me, if we were to be giving advice, it would be that when something like this comes to us, either with this application or in the future, to speak to precedent, that there would at least have been some attempt to minimize the visibility. And to your point, I think, a statement as to why it wasn't possible. So with the understanding that we aren't privy to propagation maps, et cetera, I think the importance of the aesthetic impact has clearly has precedent in this county, has been underscored.
Yeah, and
And I would lean more towards trying to be equal on public property and private property, as opposed to giving a higher emphasis. Although I understand your point about the aesthetics of the natural area, I would still want to probably have an equal view to both private and public lands.
sure. And I know Mr. Bibbins has a comment, but I just want to quickly add on to the comment that was made about precedent. So our counselor is always very careful to tell us that we're not setting a precedent because each site is unique. However, I also want to bring up an example where we allowed a tower at a high school. When we looked at the fact that at the high school, there were also very tall, very big lights that were for lighting the fields. And when you looked at all the metal standing there, it didn't seem like one tower was going to make that much of a difference. So the context of the site itself is germane to our review. So it's not that we would never approve a tall tower. It's that they were considering the context, and that's our job as the planning commission. That's why there's this extra layer of review in the first place. So. Go ahead.
So I appreciate the form versus function discussion that we're having right now. And I would say in this particular location, much like Fred, I'm personally much more concerned about the function of the tower. And as you go up to the top and then slope down, the property slopes down towards the swimming area.
Mhm.
And then the bike and the Frisbee, as you mentioned, Chair, are sort of set off into what I would say is not a flat terrain,
No.
but is actually a rugged terrain. So while I don't have sort of the cell coverage map of this, and actually I don't feel like I need it, I will say in this particular location, I think that it's important for the tower to be of a height that it actually can function in a way that that staff would have functioned if they are there. And so in my mind, these towers, because they play a dual function. If you've noticed, and many of you have been to our rural parks, and everyone knows my sort of thread on rural parks on the dais here. But those of us who've been to rural parks have probably noticed over the past few years that we've had fewer and fewer staff at those parks. So they're at the little cabins that you go in, there's probably an appropriate term for that. But at those cabins, they are rarely staffed today.
Right.
And since we have parks, since the county tends to have an abundance of rural locations to recreate, that having a way to communicate either with 911 or to have people contact you in the event that there's an emergency chez toi or at your own house, I think is important. to be able to drive from where the beach is at Walnut Creek over to Old Lynchburg Road is probably a 10-minute drive. And so I appreciate that it's probably not the loveliest thing, but I also appreciate that if we were to put a fire tower there, we'd probably have to have a fire tower at a similar height to be able to survey the forest, the hills, and all to see what was going on down there. And so that's how I've sort of looked at this. I've looked at what's happening with the county's budget vis-a-vis having staff there. We also know that the staff is usually there during the summertime, but we all, because of where we live here, we also get to use our parks well and fully use our parks fully into sort of late October, early November.
Okay.
And so we've got a cycle there that is, I think is for me at least, warrants this size tower. I would also sort of go out and sort of put out there as a moment that I hope the county is looking at all of its rural parks for some sort of communication structures. Because if you go to, whether or not you go to Chris Green Lake, or for those of you who may have been up to, there's a wonderful park, I think her name is Byram Park, that's up there sort of in Whitehall, north, so sort of north.
With that really steep park.
Now it says north, and you can take horses there. You know, there are
Yeah.
very few places we can actually take horses to in our community. That is really, really difficult to get a line out there. And one of the things I do as someone who lives on the fringe, I go to various parks to see how, if I needed to contact somebody, how could I do it? The only park right now that I can get a decent line from is Charlotte Humphreys Park, which happens to be the only park in the development area. All the rest of the parks, you'd be hard pressed if you had an emergency and you were there by yourself to be able to get somebody there to help you. And I think regardless of the form versus a function right now, given what's happening in the staffing of many of our parks, and given what's happening with this sort of the sort of explosion of people utilizing these parks, that as a community, we have an obligation to try and get to create nets of communication that help to provide safety over form. The other thing is, I've heard us talk about whether or not we could put 3 or 4 parks, 3 or 4 towers in places. Frankly, I think I can't even imagine the discussion we would have if we were trying to look at disturbing 3 different places in one of our community parks. So as far as having the least amount of impact on this land, yes, it's got some visual impact, and I can appreciate that. But as far as having a smaller footprint, I would hope that we would be more accepting of this kind of solution.
Is your, in a nutshell, your pitch is for safety.
My
Because
pitch,
that's the primal.
no, it's not just,
primary concern.
it's not just for safety, but it's also the fact that we have utilization of our parks is beyond what we would anticipate. So we also have people.
Just generally,
We just have people there in a mass that I think it wasn't there sort of 5 or 6 years ago. And we also have very different staffing structures now.
Mhm.
So even if we did have somebody in one of the kiosks, he or she, I don't know if they all have landlines. In fact, some of them don't have landlines. They would need to contact people. And so to facilitate that, whether or not there's trouble or there's a need for help. So the safety is one, but I also just think the way life has changed out here, people are traveling and they're operating in ways that it would be helpful to be able to connect. So there's a connectivity piece.
Okay. So commissioners, any comments on what Mr. Bivens has said?
Well, I think the challenge to that though is kind of going back to the original statement, where you can't really talk about the coverage aspect. So you don't know if a type 1 or type 2 can get the job done. And so is it a matter of getting the Cadillac versus the Toyota Camry versus the Pinto? Like you don't know where you stand. And so I feel like the only thing you can really judge is the aesthetic at the moment. Otherwise, anything goes. That's the way I
Right.
kind of see it.
There's
So.
nothing, there was nothing preventing the applicant from telling us that they tried 3 shorter towers and that was ineffective or,
The advice that Commissioner Missile posed, well, it's in the minutes and I hope that they take heed because it's basically, you don't have to tell us all your details of your.
right, we don't
business
need how
plan,
many people they're serving.
But you could at least tell us what you evaluated, the options that were looked at. So I can't make the leap that our colleague is making, that I don't know what size tower would work best. I don't know that a tier 2 wouldn't provide that same safety that we're talking about. And there's other ways of dealing with it, with amplifiers and ways of, you know, of making sure that you get the coverage. So we don't know. We don't know what was evaluated. We don't know the options that were discussed. So I'm having a hard time to get to the 200-foot tower without really
195.
199 with the.
No, it's 195. It's 195. I mean, I can
With
I can speak to you about towers because of another part of my life. We're dealing with the FCC, and the FCC, if a tower is over 200 feet, it has to have lights on it. This is not at over 200 feet, so it's not going to have lights on it. It's 5 feet below the FCC regulation for a tower. I would say we do actually do have a sense. If you look at the view shed piece that's on one of these pages here, the view shed piece is also sort of a signal. Can be a supplement, can be not a supplement, can be an indicator of how the signal will go out, because it has a clear.
You're too far from the mic.
Oh, it has a clear view, because this is the one thing that we talked about before. This area will never be a 5G area, because we don't have enough places that you can do points. You can do point of sight. The sight line doesn't work here. And that's 5G is all about sight lines, which is why they work in urban places, because you have those great parallel, you know, unless you're like in an older city, you have those great sort of sight lines there. So sign of light. Here, we don't have enough sort of flat land in the rural part of the county to be able to use 5G. It's just, I mean, without them being really tall towers. If we had tall towers, we could do 5G, but that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So I think what we're looking at here is that in fact trying to figure out what the balance is of form versus function. But I also appreciate that there's an aesthetic piece, but at some point I'm looking to save lives. Or I shouldn't use that, that's draconian. I'm looking to shorten the amount of time that it takes to get a response.
For someone to help.
Right.
Okay. It's up, well, you want to make one quick comment? Oh, as long as it's a quick comment and not a reiteration.
I feel like I need to be more responsive to Mr. Carazana, because we do have an answer, and I want to be clear about that. What we need at this site is 195. If tier 2 work, believe me, Verizon would offer that to the county like it has everywhere else in the county. We're not there's no advantage to us to offer a taller tower. We're not in the tower building business. We're trying to provide service. Just want to make that clear. We're asking for what we actually need in this location to provide coverage to the park and surrounding areas. Thank you. Thanks for letting me make an additional.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, I think we've heard everyone's perspective. I don't have a sense yet of where we stand, but I'm willing to make a motion and then we'll see. Okay. Could you put them back up? Your motions. I probably make a different one than what you have, but it'll still be helpful. So while you're doing that, I'm actually going to make a motion to deny SP 2022-0022 application for a tier 3 personal wireless service facility. And the reasons for that recommendation for denial are the fact that it is not in keeping with the county's aesthetic desires for cell tower concealment.
And Madam Chair, if that concludes your motion, I would also point out in the staff report, there were 2 other items that should be included in a recommended denial. I'm looking at page 11 of the staff report.
Okay.
One of which is if the locality is aware of any modifications to the project that would permit the locality to approve the proposed project, the locality should identify them in the written statement provided under subdivision 1. So if the commission is aware of any modifications that might make this proposal approvable, it should state. The other thing is, as noted in the staff report, any motion to recommend denial should also clarify that the recommendation is not based on, and I'm sorry for the long code site here, Virginia Code Section 15.2-2316.4:2A, but that it's based on Section 15.2-2316.4:2B1. That is to say that it's based on permissible rather than impermissible grounds.
I couldn't possibly repeat what you just said.
I understand. So we'll take them one at a time. Are there any, as part of your motion, are there any grounds or any modifications that you would like the commission to stipulate that would allow this proposal to be approved?
The only, I guess, the only condition that would allow for me to consider approval is if it were at a treetop tower that would guarantee almost full concealment in the park.
Okay. And then your motion would be, your recommendation would be, would not be based on Virginia Code Section 15.2-2316.4:2A, but that it's based on 15.2-2316.4:2B1.
Yes.
All right.
Sorry, my tablet went to sleep during this long deliberation. Couldn't stay with us. So that is my motion. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
The only thing I would ask is that when we are going through the various ordinances, that the ordinance for cell towers actually really be looked at in a way
I
that helps to
agree.
facilitate the conversation that we consistently have
Yeah.
at this diocese, and that because we're doing all of this based on an ordinance that was done, is it now 22 years ago? Versus one that's current and takes into consideration the state of technology as it is today.
I agree with that. And I could, same could be said of our lighting ordinance, which we have
We're
asked
not doing that
repeatedly.
right now.
I'm just saying there are a number of codes that
I'm-
technology has fast outpaced what we have in writing. Mr. Rapp, did you want to say something?
I was just gonna say, we actually do have the cell tower ordinance review on the books right now. We have a proposal in and we should be getting that started with Mr. Fritz, who's in the audience as well pretty soon. The board's directed us to move forward with that. So
Great.
that will be coming to this commission over the next 6 months.
Okay, you
Sure.
got him very excited. All right. Mr. Murray.
Yeah, I just might suggest too, if this were to come back before us, that there might be landowners nearby who might appreciate a balloon test from their house. And if it came with that, that might be a helpful thing for us to see.
All right, any further discussion? Carolyn, will you call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
No,
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Missile.
Aye.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. So the planning commission recommends a denial of this. I vote of 5-1. This will next go to the Board of Supervisors. For their consideration, they have the final say on whether this tower is approved or not. Thank you. Okay. We good? Do we need a break or anything? Okay, rock on. All right. We're now ready to move to the next public hearing of the evening. ZMA 2021-00001 Willow Glen. May we have the staff report? Mr. Riddleman.
Good evening, planning commissioners. My name is Andy Breidelbach, and I am a senior planner here with the Albemarle County Planning Division. This evening, I'm giving a presentation on ZMA 2021-1 Willow Glen. So to start off, this is an aerial view of the subject property of this rezoning application. It consists of 6 parcels in Willow Glen. There are 2 phases. There's one phase, which I've circled, that has already been developed with 36 residential units and associated open space lots. And 3 of those parcels, 2 of the open space parcels and 1 of the residential lots is part of this rezoning application. And then the majority of this application is what is called phase 2 of Willow Glen, and that consists of 3 larger undeveloped parcels that I've highlighted. You have the airport to the west, Deerwood Village and Abington Place to the east. And then I also wanted to just note that there is one parcel that Willow Glen surrounds. I've identified it here on this aerial view. It's kind of a square-shaped parcel on Dickerson Road. And so I just wanted to clarify that that parcel is not a part of this application. So as I mentioned, this application consists of 6 parcels that total approximately 20.457 acres. 3 of those parcels are in the phase 2 and they are 19.27 acres. And then the 3 parcels of phase 1 that I mentioned are included really for the proffer amendments that are a part of this application. This is an amendment to a previously approved rezoning ZMA 2006-19. And so the zoning district planned residential development will remain the same. And this application is to amend both the application plan and the proffers that were previously approved and accepted with that earlier rezoning. The applicant is requesting to increase the maximum number of units in the development by a total of 126. So there are currently 198 units permitted in the phase 2 area, and the applicant is requesting a maximum of 324 units in that phase 2 area for that overall increase of 126. And then there are 36 units that have previously been constructed in phase 1. So the overall Willow Glen development would total 360 units. In phase 2, the gross and net density would be 16.81 units, and then pulling the phase 1 part of the development that's already been constructed, it would be an overall density of 15.08 units. So the zoning of this property, as I mentioned, it does include 6 parcels that are PRD in accordance with the previously approved rezoning that does include proffers. There's a maximum of 198 units permitted in phase 2. As I mentioned, it's 234 units total, the 36 units already constructed in phase 1, and that leaves 198 units left that could be built in phase 2. The overlay zoning districts for this property include steep slopes and the airport impact area. The surrounding zoning districts, there is rural areas to the west, north, and southwest. However, I do want to point out that although these properties are zoned rural areas, they are all located within the community of Hollymead development area. The property to the east, Deerwood Village, is zoned R4. Abington Place to the southeast is zoned Neighborhood Model District. And then there are some properties to the south zoned R15 residential. So looking at the comprehensive plan, this is in the Places 29 master plan. As I mentioned, all of the surrounding properties are located within the Places 29 master plan and are located within a development area. The vast majority of this site, which is identified with the orange color, is urban density residential, which allows residential between 6.01 and 34 units per acre, along with supporting uses. And then there was a very small sliver of property in the southeast portion of this property that is designated neighborhood density residential, which is the yellow color at 3 to 6 units per acre. And in the Places 29 master plan for residential building height and urban density residential, it does recommend a maximum of 4 stories. So getting more into the specifics of this proposal, as I've previously mentioned, it's a request for a maximum of 324 dwelling units in phase 2, totaling 360 units in all of Willow Glen. And so it would be an increase of 126 units. The density, I've already mentioned 16.81 units in phase 2 alone. One change that the applicant is requesting is a change in the unit types for phase two. Currently, under the existing rezoning, it's a mix of different unit types, single family detached, townhouses, duplexes, condos. However, the applicant is looking to construct all multifamily units with this new amendment. It would be those multifamily apartments would be spread across 12 residential buildings. 3 to 4 stories in height. Really, they're 3 stories on the front facade, but some of them being built into a hillside or 4 stories on the rear. There are also additional buildings for a clubhouse and a fitness center. There are 2 side entrances into the property off of Dickerson Road. And currently, under the existing rezoning, there is a proffered road connection from Town Center Drive through the Willow Glen development over to Dickerson Road. And the applicant is proposing to eliminate this through street and making the portion of that existing road that that is currently constructed in phase 1 terminate in a turnaround and become a dead-end street. In PRD districts, the ordinance does require that 25% of the property be open space, and the applicant is proposing that 37, almost 38% of the phase 2 property would be an open space, and this comes out to approximately 7.29 acres. So this is just a screenshot of the new application plan that is being proposed, showing the building envelopes for all of the various buildings surrounding the site, and then the open space areas, the stormwater management pond in the rear, which would also be utilized as open space. And this is also included in the staff report package. And then for comparison, I've included the old application plan. This is the one that was approved originally back in the 2006 rezoning. And this is also included in attachment 4 of the staff report. So looking at the specifics of the proffers for this proposal, as I mentioned, not only is the application plan being proposed to change, but the proffers are changing as well. The applicant is proposing to remove a proffer that requires 15% of the constructed dwelling units being affordable for 10 years, as well as a county option for cash in lieu. However, I do want to note that the affordable housing proffer is not really being eliminated. It's being replaced with a note on the application plan, which is permitted since the application plan is the governing plan for this, for a planned development district. And so the applicant is proposing to make 20% of the constructed units in phase 2 affordable at 80% AMI for a period of 15 years. And this note is note number 4 on the new application plan. The applicant is requesting to remove a proffer that was accepted with the original rezoning that would require a cash contribution for each unit that was constructed that was not designated as affordable. The applicant, as I've mentioned previously, is requesting to remove the proffered connection to Town Center Drive, and this is that through road connecting Town Center Drive through this development over to Dickerson Road. And so the portion of this road that's already been constructed in phase 1, it's known as Shannon Glen Court, and that would be terminated in phase 1 near the property line between phase 1 and phase 2. And so there would be no vehicular connections between the 2 phases. However, the applicant is proposing trail connections to connect those 2 phases. And then the applicant is also proffering sidewalk construction and conveyance of a temporary grading and construction easement for the Dickerson Road frontage on the southwest side of the property. And that grading and construction easement is for allowing the extension of that sidewalk onto the adjacent property when that property gets developed. So looking at the schools, I first wanted to note that in the staff report and the grid that I'd included in the staff report, the names on the columns of that grid, the names of the schools were incorrect, but in the text of the staff report, I had included the correct school names. So I just wanted to note that discrepancy. And so I've included the correct school names in this grid. It's Baker Butler Elementary, Lakeside Middle, and Albemarle High School. Baker Butler and Albemarle High School are currently over capacity, and both are expected to remain so over the next 10-year planning period of the school system. And of course, this development would add additional students at both of those schools. Lakeside Middle does have capacity at this time. However, according to the school system's projections, it is expected to be over capacity by the 2028-29 school year. And overall, in the bottom row of this grid, you can see the number of students projected to be generated at each school based on the school system's calculator that they provide us. So it's roughly 29 students at the elementary school level, 6.5 students at the middle school level, and 19.5 students at the high school level, for a total of about 55 students. And I'll also note that this 55 includes all 324 units in the proposed with this development. It does not include just the increase in students from what is currently permitted by right. So looking at the streets and transportation issues with this proposal, a TIA was submitted and reviewed with this application, and there are no concerns from VDOT or the county's transportation planning staff with this TIA. Shannon Glen Court, as I've mentioned, is the constructed portion of the through street that had been approved with the previous rezoning. It was approved as a public street. However, the bonds are still in place, and it has not been accepted by VDOT for public maintenance at this time. And to truncate the street in the phase 1, as the applicant is requesting to do, and not extend it farther into the phase 2 area, VDOT does require some changes to the street to be made, mainly to make the temporary turnaround that's currently there become a permanent turnaround so that it can meet all cul-de-sac standards. As I mentioned, the applicant is proposing trail system around the property, including a bridge and trail connecting the end of Shannon Glen Court with the phase 2 property. So in place of extending that through road, they would include walking and biking multi-use trails. And then, as I mentioned, there is a sidewalk proffered along the southwest frontage of the property. There is no sidewalk currently being provided along the northwest frontage of the property. So I just wanted to clarify some on that staff sees sidewalks as being important for pedestrian orientation, multimodal transportation, and interparcel connectivity, which are all important principles of the 12 neighborhood model principles. However, I do want to note and acknowledge that due to some recent changes in VDOT policy, they may not accept so-called sidewalks to nowhere, sidewalks that don't connect on either end to other sidewalks. They may not accept that into the public highway maintenance system. So that could be an issue in constructing sidewalks in areas that don't have other sidewalks currently to be able to connect to. So just a graphic showing an inset from the conceptual plan, just to kind of clarify where the sidewalk is provided and proffered on the right side. This is kind of the southwest portion of the property. And then on the left side, that's the northwest portion of the property. There is no sidewalk provided. And then, of course, there is that parcel in the middle that is not a part of this rezoning. Along with this rezoning application, the applicant did request 2 special exceptions. One is to request a modification in the recreational facilities from those that are listed in the zoning ordinance. It includes a reduced number of tot lots from what the zoning ordinance requires. However, the applicant is still proposing 3 to be provided throughout this development. And instead of that, those tot lots would be replaced with recreational facilities such as a clubhouse, a fitness center with a pool. There are various trails throughout the property connecting buildings to the areas, and facilities around that stormwater management pond to make that pond more of an amenity for the development, including items such as a viewing platform and a gazebo. And then the applicant also submitted a request to reduce the required number of parking spaces across the entire development by about 5%, which would be about 28 parking spaces. And about 570 parking spaces would still be provided in this development. And staff has no objections to these requests if approval of the ZMA is recommended. So there are several positive aspects to this development. The request is consistent with the uses and the density recommended by the Places 29 master plan. The density of 16 units per acre falls within that range of 6 to 34 units per acre in urban density residential. The request is consistent or mostly consistent with the majority of the applicable neighborhood model principles. And the request does provide affordable units at 20% of the total number of units constructed, which is consistent with the county's policy on affordable housing. There are some concerns, however, with this development. Number one being the interparcel vehicular connectivity is being eliminated with this proposal. As I've mentioned several times, that road Shannon Glen Court, it's designated as Road D in the approved application plan from the 2006 rezoning. Connecting phase 1 and 2, that's proposed to be eliminated. And so there would be no vehicular connections between these two phases and going through this development between Town Center and Dickerson Road. Shannon Glen Court, which is that portion that's been constructed, as I mentioned, has not yet been accepted by VDOT into the public road system. And so it would still need to work through that process and to address any concerns that VDOT or the engineering division of the county may have in ensuring that a road that was previously expected to be extended farther and is now proposed to be truncated into a dead-end cul-de-sac could still be accepted by VDOT. The proposed development, as I mentioned, would result in additional student enrollment at Albemarle High and Baker Butler Elementary Schools, which are both already over capacity, and then the sidewalk issue, which I mentioned. So staff's recommendations for this application for the rezoning ZMA 2021-1, staff does not recommend approval of ZMA 2021-1 Willow Glen for the concerns that I outlined in the previous slide. And then regarding special exceptions 2021-7 and 2021-8, if the Planning Commission does choose to recommend approval of the rezoning, staff has no objections to the approval of either of these special exceptions. However, of course, if the Planning Commission chooses not to recommend approval of the rezoning, then it would not make sense to approve either of the special exceptions either. So I'm available now or after the public hearing for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Any questions for staff? Yep. Okay.
I guess I do have one question, but go ahead, Commissioner.
Go ahead,
Bender.
go ahead,
No,
go
after
ahead.
you, sir.
So Andy, this is effectively a new proposal. Since even though the plan was established, I think you said 15 years ago.
Yes, the original rezoning was approved in 2007.
So the applicant would not have to come before the planning commission if they just went ahead and did phase 2. So if they had decided to do phase 2 the way it was decided 15 years ago, they could get the various permits that they need to obtain and just roll it out.
Correct, yes.
So basically what we're being asked to consider right now is to divorce a proposal that got established 15 years ago and say, this is what it was supposed to be, but we're cutting off the larger piece of it because this clearly was the larger piece of it. And we're being asked to consider this new proposal and to disregard all of the various connectivity that was agreed to 15 years ago. Because basically all the connectivity is being pushed away. Because I will frankly say, I don't think a walking bridge is connectivity if you said there was going to be a road. So basically, we're looking at a completely different
Yep.
use of this piece of property.
Yep.
Okay.
Except it's housing. It's
Well, yes.
residential. It's still
It's
residential.
still residential, excuse me. It's still
Okay.
residential.
It's not yet. It's
But
not
my
going housing.
architecture
to
friend
commercial.
beat me up here. This.
Who'd like to go next?
I just have a quick question regarding the parking. I know they requested a 5% reduction. Is that the maximum they could request?
They could request more. I think it's up to 30% is permitted by the ordinance. But for the flexibility of design and what they were proposing, it sounded like 5% was about what worked for them.
That's good to know, but it wasn't a cap placed by the county.
No.
Got it. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a, somewhat off topic question. So I'm looking at the height of, and I'm having a hard time but there's a 4-story pitch roof. So does the maximum height that they're proposing exceed our guidelines for having a step back?
It does not. That is one thing we looked at. And so the 4-story height where it's on the basement is generally on the rear of the buildings. And so we measure the step back requirement from the front of the buildings, which is
Those within
3.
those guys, I couldn't quite tell from.
It looks, yeah, there's an inset that looks like it's 45 feet tall.
Right, and then I think he was just explaining that's in the back side of the,
Okay,
but it's still.
with the basement.
With the basement.
It's 50, with the basement is 50.
Is that what it says there?
Yeah, the scale shows the basement to be 50.
But your evaluation was that it fell within our.
Correct. Yes, it does not need a special exception for waiving the step back requirement.
All right, other questions for staff at this point? Okay, hearing none, we will switch to hear from the applicant. Welcome back.
All right. Good evening again, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I'm Lori Schweller, representing the applicant. We're requesting your recommendation of approval for Dickerson Overlook, which is phase 2 of Willow Glen. The applicant, Dickerson Ridge LLC, is represented by George Ray. The Breeden Construction is the contract purchaser, developer, builder, and manager. And tonight we have with us Brian Revere and Moses Romero. Steve Edwards is here. He prepared all of the zoning drawings and design. We have Joe Wallace from Ramey Kemp for traffic engineering, and my colleague Valerie Long and I are here from Williams Mullen. The property that you're considering tonight is 3 tax map parcels comprising a little over 19 acres. Mr. Wedelback described the context, lots of different housing types around the project. The airport is immediately across Dickerson Road to the west. Hollymead Town Center, obviously, immediately to the right, to the east, about 0.7 mile. This is the view northbound from Dickerson Road, airport on the left and the project property on the right. 700 feet south of this is the intersection with Town Center Drive. Quick history of the project. It was rezoned in 2007. A site plan approved in 2008, and then the recession hit. And so George Ray has been working tirelessly to make this project work in a number of different ways. And we can talk about that in more detail if you would like to. Just to note that he did build phase 1 with 14 single family detached and 22 townhomes. And in doing so, provided over $500,000 in cash proffers, 6 affordable units, and $10,000 to the service authority to analyze and upgrade systems. Our request tonight will provide high quality multifamily housing in the development area in close proximity to all other housing types. It would eliminate the cash proffers to make the project economically viable. It will increase dramatically the number of affordable units and affordability generally, and will provide interparcel connectivity between the existing Willow Glen neighborhood and Dickerson Overlook as a ped bike connection rather than vehicular. This is designated urban density residential, which calls for a range of 6.01 to 34 dwelling units per acre. The existing plan is only 10 dwelling units per acre. In phase 2, we're proposing 16.81 dwelling units per acre, which is needed in the development area for housing. In the application plan, you can see our new pedestrian path circling the neighborhood, an amenity pond that will be stocked with fish. You can see outdoor bicycle racks and indoor bicycle storage facilities throughout the project, and a location in front for a future transit stop if the routes extend in this direction. This PRD plan is where our affordable housing commitment is located. In the illustrative plan, you can see that there will be parks throughout the neighborhood, not just in the center. The recreational area exceeds what's required with 38% in this phase. We have requested some substitutions to make the recreational area more appropriate for the residents. Breeden Construction has constructed at least 45 other developments in Virginia and is very familiar with what its residents will use and would like to see. All recreational amenities will be free and available to both Willow Glen Phase 1 and Dickerson Overlook. The pool and gym membership is available for a fee to all the residents. So let's look a little closer at the recreational facilities. I want to show you the many different parks and other amenities throughout the neighborhood. Here we are near the pond. There's an amphitheater, the pool, and the fitness center. There are 3 tot lots or playgrounds. There's a dog park. There are gathering places throughout the development with seating areas, fire pits, and grilling stations. There's also a proposed community garden. And again, more gathering spaces. And then in the center, a large lawn area with various amenities. Want to address the interparcel connectivity and pedestrian-friendly design. On this map, this Google map, you can see that the parcel connection that we're providing for pedestrians and cyclists will encourage bike ped interconnectivity. There's already a sidewalk along Town Center Drive. There is no impact that needs to be addressed with a vehicular connection. We don't have any transportation issues in this area. You can see the blue line. If you went by road from the southern entrance to the development to the intersection of Shannon Glen Court, which is the road that the red line is going through, and Town Center Drive, that blue line is 0.4 mile. The red line is 0.3 mile and will take twice as long to traverse because you're going through areas where you have, traffic bumps to slow down traffic. You have pedestrians crossing the road, and you're passing through Shannon Glen Court, which is a neighborhood that's developed over the past 15 years, and people back out of their driveways and their kids play in the street, and they expect that to be a safe street. We think that this interparcel connection, as we're proposing it, is a positive, not a negative. We think it's a positive because the development will no longer be automobile centric. The surrounding development over the past 15 years makes it impractical to do this development. It would be unfair to send the cars from 300 apartment units through Shannon Glen Court. And the path system will encourage bike and ped use, which is consistent with the neighborhood model principles. We are proffering a sidewalk from the southern entrance south, and that will be important for connection to eventually to the neighborhood center on the parcel on the other side of Town Center Drive. I'd like to talk about affordable housing and the commitment here. The existing plan calls for 15%, that's 35 units. The for sale units, which only have to be held for 60 days, would be at 80% AMI. The for rent units are offered at 120% AMI, and that period of affordability is 10 years. There's also a cash in lieu option. What we're proposing, we're trying to get, as close as we can to the county's housing policy. We're doing 20% affordable housing, which for the planned 308 apartment units is 68 units. So that's 33 additional affordable units that you would get. Rent 80% AMI for a longer period, 15 years. And they will all be provided on site. So again, 20% of the units for 15 years, rental rate won't exceed 30% of 80% of the area median income, and that includes all your utilities. We would like to do more. Breeden would very much like to do more. They're very supportive of affordable housing. The problem is it won't be economically viable until we have some developer incentives. So if we get through zoning with an approval, then we can work on a performance agreement. That would make sense with perhaps a real estate tax abatement plan for the life of the affordability. As to schools, the current plan versus the proposed plan is an increase of only 18 students. So a summary of proposed changes. Housing type, we're reducing to one type, but we're surrounded by every other type in this area. Increase in density more appropriate to the growth area, more affordable housing units with a longer period of affordability, and a ped bike connection rather than a vehicular cut through. This will be a quality design and construction. Burkmar Landing was also built by Breeden, so you know the type of amenity and design that you will get with that. Staff has listed 3 positive aspects to this request. We think there are many more. We want to add to those 3 more green space and recreational areas than required with carefully thought out amenities. Recreation areas are fully available to phase 1. There's no traffic routed through phase 1. There will be a pedestrian bicycle connection between the phases and less environmental impact. Thank you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant?
I know that it was just a concept, but when I was showing the stormwater pond, it looked like there was no vegetation around the stormwater pond and it looked like grass came right up to the pond. I would strongly encourage with that for you to use a buffer of native plants. There are problems, particularly with cyanobacteria blooms that can kill pets. And so for it to function as stormwater, it needs to be filtered through native vegetation.
Thank you for those comments. I'm sure we'll be working on those during the engineering phase, the stormwater management plan. Thank you.
Just note your design suggestion also limits the use of the pond by geese. Because if you don't want a pond surrounded by obnoxious geese and poo, that design does a better job.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the report. I just have a couple of questions at the moment. Could you talk a little bit about why the drastic change? Like when you look at the proposal from 2007 to now, it's very different. And I guess my colleagues will determine if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but could you talk a little bit more about what drove those changes?
I'd be happy to. Thank you for that question. There have been quite a number of changes through the years and a number of attempts to make changes. The problem with the plan as it currently exists is it would require another $1.5 million or so of cash proffers that would not be reasonable under today's state law. And those make the project economically not viable. In addition to the cash proffers, the vehicular connection between the 2 parcels would be $1 million in addition. So it'd be a very expensive project to develop it as it is. So George Ray has tried a number of things, and Valerie has been here in front of this body and the board to try a number of things to make the project work. One of those was in 2018, there was an application to rezone to do commercial development along Dickerson Road. And George had that additional parcel under contract. And that was going to be sort of commercial with warehousing and so on, and loading docks. But that was not successful because of additional traffic that it would bring. So then they did some major site plan amendments and came before you again to try to reduce the proffers, bifurcating proffers that were associated with expanding facilities, which is no longer allowed. And so they tried to reduce the proffers significantly by about 2/3. And also for a credit for units that could have been built under the RA zoning, which was the initial zoning here. And that also failed. So, so he's tried a number of things. It's been in contract with different builders. He was even he had a contract to sell all the lots during that time, but because the proffer reduction failed, he wasn't able to sell the lots. So now he's got Breeden Construction, high quality, well-respected, experienced developer, ready to develop and build, this high quality apartment complex, as you have seen already in Albemarle County. And this will be a beautiful project. It will solve all the problems. Without the cash proffers, it can be done. And it provides all the amenities that, as I've described.
I said one more before.
Okay.
I pass it
Go
on.
for it.
Who's the target audience for this project?
I think this project, it'll have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, so it can run the gamut. When I look at this project, I think of professionals, especially people who need to travel a lot. You can't get more convenient to the airport, people who work in the northern part of the county. It's a great location because of Hollymead Town Center, so all of your amenities are there. You could even have graduate students. I think it runs the gamut based on location and amenities.
Thank you.
Now, I certainly could appreciate that. I'm flying in at 12:30 in the morning on Monday. I would have really loved to go across the street to my apartment. Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
I don't wanna
so,
neglect these.
so 2 questions.
Okay.
First one, I know that the overstressed schools nearby is one of the concerns of staff. But, we've also heard up here in the Planning Commission about the need for preschools in the area. And have you ever considered any option for providing daycare on site or some kind of space for preschool could exist? That'd be one thing. And then the other one would be, could you address the staff's concern about the sidewalk not being provided on Dickerson Road?
Sure. I won't be able to answer the first question. To my knowledge, there is no plan for a preschool on the site, and it hasn't been considered, but I might have to defer to Mr. Revere for that question. I can certainly answer the question regarding the sidewalk north of the site. Would it be okay if I had my presentation back up again? So what Andy Reitelbach was referring to was VDOT regulations adopted this summer, VDOT Complete Streets, Bicycle and Pedestrian Guidelines. And I'll just read you a couple of excerpts that apply to that. Ending a pedestrian access route into a parking lot or roadway shoulder or stub outs in anticipation of future extension are not acceptable means of terminating a pedestrian access route. So if you look at Google Maps, where our site is located, and go north of that on this side of Dickerson Road, the only thing there is large open green fields with single family homes dotting the landscape. There's nothing there that you would connect to, and then you hit Airport Road. So there's a lot of reason to go south, because there is, in the comp plan, there's a proposed neighborhood center a little bit further south. And then, of course, there's the huge regional service center or center, Hollymead Town Center, to the east, of course. So there are reasons to go south. There are no reasons at this point to go north. So the question might be, well, will you dedicate frontage if needed for future sidewalk? What you can see when you look at the plans, though, is that the right of way is already so wide. There's plenty of room within the right of way for sidewalks already. So at this point, it just didn't seem necessary. During site planning, if staff determines that there is something that's needed, we will certainly work with them at that point. But we didn't see the need for it at this time.
Thank you.
Going this direction.
All right, that's right. So, thank you again. So coming in the opposite direction, the applicant doesn't own the piece of property that's on the corner of whatever that is there.
Dickerson and Town Center Drive.
Right, they don't own the property.
That's right.
And so basically, we're talking about putting a piece of sidewalk in that might get built someday, might not get built someday, depending on what goes on, what takes place on that corner side.
Well, right, we're proffering to build the sidewalk. At the time that we build the right turn taper into the southern entrance, we will build the sidewalk along there and grant an easement for the rest of it, for grading and so on. But the sidewalk along the frontage to the south of us presumably wouldn't be built until that owner developed his property.
So that basically anyone who lives in that community, they're really going to need that pedestrian, if there is a pedestrian, they're going to need some connection from there to effectively walk or bicycle over to Holly Beach Center.
That's true, and it will be shorter for them to go, on the proposed connector route.
If it's by vehicle, if it's not by vehicle, it's not shorter. Or maybe shorter, but it's more dangerous. So I wouldn't want to take a trolley. That's not what they're called. Those things
Could I put my slide back on the screen?
a stroller, thank you. I wouldn't want to take a stroller and come out, make a left-hand turn because there's no sidewalk. I definitely would want to
okay.
have some sort of, I'm hoping there was a road, but I want to have some sort of connection within the community. There we go. Thank you.
I think I misunderstood what you said originally,
Yeah.
Mr. Bivens. It would be safer to go through the community.
Okay,
Yes.
So that's one of the reasons why we have to have some sort of connectivity, whether or not it's a road or it's or a pedestrian pit. So
Yes.
here's the question that I have. So my colleagues were asking questions about cellular phone returns, and I know I'm not going to get the answer because you're going to tell me because it doesn't match your return on investment, which I will then turn to everybody and say, we never get to hear what the developer's return of investment is. So I'm just going to say that as a gentle thing when we make these decisions here. So I would understand if we were going to do 198 units, which were allowed in phase 2, and you do them however you want to do them. Do multi-level, do cottages, do however you want to. But it's basically just asking us to have a change in structures, but it's the same census. And then I would have a little concern about why then aren't we putting a road in, because the people in phase 1 bought in phase 1, assuming there'd be 198 units over there with a road. Okay.
Right.
And so I don't get that. So I really want to answer the question, why don't you just come in here and saying, we really want to do 198 units, but we don't want to make it as varied as it was in the original request. And we just want to do multifamily units, which I would appreciate. And I would be very happy to see something like that. I am struggling why I'm increasing it by almost half. That I'm struggling with that. And I know you'll tell me because it's your return on investment. And I will then look at you and say, well, I have no idea what your return on investment is. It could be 50 cents. It could be 10 cents. It could be a nickel. And so that goes to my whole point about we don't know what the business plan is on any of this. And so we have to take what our applicants tell me their business plans are for us to accept that. But I'll be quiet on that now and wait for you to respond.
Well, what Breeden is proposing is 308 units. They have designed for 308 units. So it's roughly 100-unit increase. And keep in mind that almost 70 units will be affordable units. So we do want to do more units. We do want to do only multifamily housing because that's what they do. I think that the comment about phase 1 folks being prepared for that interconnection is certainly fair, except that this development, phase 1, has happened over the course of many years. And so those people have moved in over the course of 2013 to 2021, probably aren't all as familiar with the former application as you may be. And they have lived there. Some have lived there for a long time. And so they are used to their small street ending in a cul-de-sac, essentially. There are 2 streets in phase 1. There's Tempelhof Court, which always was private, always intended to be private, will remain private. And then there's Shannon Glen Court. And though the residents in there probably feel that they're in an enclave and would be very dismayed, as you know, from the petition that you received. All of them, all 36, but 4, signed this petition to say they would be dismayed to have a, cut through their neighborhood because they think it would be unsafe. If you're backing into your street from your driveway, which you've been doing for 5, 10, 15 years, it's not great. It's not the same as Eastern Avenue down in Crozet where you've got a through road, Quarry Farm Road, it's a through road, and you don't have, the houses aren't backing their driveways into Eastern Avenue while all of Crozet is coming through Eastern Avenue.
So let me just, I appreciate it. So I get the fact that I bought a house, I've been in my house, and now I've established a certain lifestyle. And therefore my lifestyle is going to change if a street comes through there, because that's not, even though it was on the plan, it hasn't been there. So now it's okay, I get that. But please tell me why we just didn't do 198 units. What was the cause to push the number of units? Because right now you don't even have to come to us. The applicant didn't have to come back to us if they probably had to do for form, did they?
It's
They would have
not,
had to come to us for form, but we wouldn't be wrestling, or some of us wouldn't be wrestling with the increase in density to this degree.
it's not just form. The prior project was approved for this mix of housing. So we needed to come back to you if we want to do a multifamily housing development. This mix of housing calls for single family detached, single family attached, condominiums. There's no apartment complex attribute to
I
it.
think I'm probably not making myself clear. I understand that there is an image here that says this is the housing mix.
Mhm.
Okay, but at the end of the day, this housing mix is for 198 units.
Right.
That if I sort of look at it, it's 2.5. If I say 2.5 bedrooms in it, that's going to give me a census of maybe 315 people, additional people here. Right now, we're being asked to go up to 900 bedrooms or 900 additional. If I'm just doing 2.5 rooms per 2.5 bedrooms per structure. And so that's a significant difference where I would have said, okay, you want to do a different sort of mix, a different layout, a different form, to use my colleagues, how they're helping me to understand some of this, a different form, but the form is still for the same number of the same amount of density.
It is for greater, yes, it is for greater density, no doubt about that. And it is for economic reasons, but it's what we need in the development areas of the county. This group has analyzed how much development area do we have? Do we have enough for the residences that we need? The answer was we don't, unless we do higher density on the range that's permitted in each area. And that's what we're trying to do. We're still, only at 16.81, but we are trying to get higher density, which is very appropriate in this area of the county, surrounded by all types of other housing.
So, but you just said a moment ago that you were looking for 308 units and the staff report says 324.
Yes, so we have requested a maximum of 324. That was because we initially applied for this rezoning almost 2 years ago. And during this time, as we've worked through the planning process, Breeden has crystallized its plan, and that number is now 308. So though we are requesting a maximum of 324, I can tell you there will be 308 apartment units. If
Okay,
approved.
but legally, we're going to have to stick with the 324 because that's what's in the application, just to be clear.
Yes, and I was very upfront when I was providing affordable housing unit numbers to use 308, not 324. I'm using the actual number.
Right, okay, go ahead. That was all. I just wanted you to clarify that difference.
Yes,
We have to know what it is we would be voting on.
yes.
Mr. Bibbins, did you have more?
I'm passing it
You're
to,
passing
I'm
the-
passing to my
passing the-
colleagues.
The talking stick?
Yeah,
Okay.
the talking stick. Here's the talking stick.
So I'll try to fill in your blank, but I
Thank
I
you.
think it's the calculation on the 80, the 20%, right? So the 20% is based on the 308.
Yes.
Yep.
It's 20% of whatever is constructed. So we would have to provide 20% of whatever is constructed. To give you a comparison, I use 308 since that's what we expect to show there would be 33
But the
additional
numbers we have in
units,
the application is for the 327,
324.
324.
Yes, maximum.
So I guess I'm not sure how that gets reconciled, but.
We'll leave it.
Well,
to
they're,
them.
yeah, they're,
We'll leave it to them.
they,
Okay.
I mean, well, they could, for example, they could build 300 and then it would be 20% of that.
Right, right.
Percent.
We're giving them a maximum.
Right.
That's what we're being asked to vote on. They could change they could say something in the business model, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, it's
Pass the baton. You
292.
pass the baton to me.
Okay.
I was just trying to follow.
Yeah.
up.
Thank you.
No, that's
Thank you.
fine. I just want to be clear.
Because that's where I was going.
It is based on what's in the application, not what they
So
end up building.
He can have the rest of my baton. He has a baton.
Excuse me.
You could have it back.
Would any other commissioners like?
So really
more.
quickly on the back on the connectivity issue. And I can appreciate not having vehicular. I mean, I could see where there's a benefit there potentially to both developments. I'll separate them. However, the only connectivity that you do have is pedestrian. I'm just wondering if not encouraging also some bike. So bike ped, not just.
Right.
So
Yes,
but I don't
definitely.
see any bike on at least,
Or bike lanes.
any kind of bike lane, any separation of pedestrian or. I mean, the only one I see that's connecting is the darker brown that is pedestrian only.
Yes, it is intended to be multimodal path. So it would be for bike and ped, and we can work through the details of that during site planning. I understand what you're saying, that you want some protection of pedestrians separated from bike.
Well, I want to both encourage the bike because I
Mhm.
think it would make a lot of sense for people that they can.
You'd ride your
they
bike to
can
go
ride
to the
your bike
pool,
across,
probably.
Yeah.
Right, right. I
And they
understand.
would probably want to do that anyway.
Mhm.
And you probably want to design it so that it is appropriate for
Yeah,
both
that,
bike and ped.
thank you. That's good advice.
Thanks. Actually, on that point, I heard you say bike ped, but just so you know, it's on here as pedestrian only. It's on the
Okay.
plans as pedestrian only. That's why we're confused, I think.
I see. Okay.
It says pedestrian
you.
only.
Yeah, specifically
That-
that.
You could add that as a
Yeah.
condition later if you decided to move forward.
So I just had a couple quick questions. I love going last because a lot of them have been answered. Thanks for the presentation. It was really helpful to have you clarify some of the interconnectivity issues. I'm curious, was part of that driven because you had to expand the stormwater pond and therefore couldn't get across that area? Did that come into
think-
consideration?
Another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I figured.
And also, trying to be sensitive to the intermittent creek that runs along the southern border as well.
That you would have otherwise had to cross, right?
That's correct. Yes.
The parking, I mean, it's quite obvious, to everybody that you're basically driving through parking lots everywhere on the site. I'm curious, your 5% number that I asked staff about also. Is it possible that could be reduced even more? And one of the things that I'm thinking is the area adjacent to the stormwater pond, it's really nice to be able to do a lap around a pond. And on the adjacent parking to B3, B3 and B2 on the outer perimeter, you only have single loaded parking, whereas you have double loaded parking adjacent to the pond.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if there's a way to somehow provide single loaded parking along the pond to provide better pedestrian access and circulation around that.
Maybe that. Because that would be nicer with a bigger front.
In response to your initial question, Breeden Construction decided on the number of parking spaces that it needed based on other developments. So that's the reason for that particular.
Got it.
But in terms of configuration, I'll let Steve speak to that.
Thanks.
Good evening, Steve Edwards.
Hey, Steve.
I think there is room right now, as you can see in the illustration.
Sorry, sir, can you say your name for the record for the minutes?
Steve Edwards, Edwards Design Studio. The illustration shows that double bay of parking there on the backside of B8. And that's to help accommodate the residents on both sides of the building. There is garages integrated within several of the buildings that help reduce the amount of parking.
Right.
I think that there could be a way that we can introduce a path down that hill. So there can be a complete circumnavigable route around the Stockton pond. But I think that would come later in the site plan process.
Right, understood. Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then just a question of curiosity, is it intended that this would be phased? And if so, how might that develop?
Would you want to come to that? While Steve is answering your question, I want to bring up the plan again, because I think I misunderstood your question about the ped trail.
The intent is to be one phase, one complete phase, but if financing comes
Yeah.
into play, that might change that a little bit. But the idea is to start one building, roll right into the next one, as they've done in all their other projects.
Good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Those are my only questions. Thanks.
I wanted to get back to you regarding your comment. I actually didn't know where the notation is that it says pedestrian only. And so I wanted to get some clarification. Here's the plan. And this is the connection between the phases here, which says pedestrian bike connection, but there's an existing pedestrian connection that's being used while we're working on redevelopment. Is that what you were referring to?
So that connector that you have, that's like an L shape, the dark brown.
This one, yes.
Yes, that one. If your notes on your revised site plan,
E5, page Z5.
C5. Here, Z, I think it's a Z.
Yes, it's a Z.
Okay. So there's a note. We'll
There's
find
a
it.
note that says pedestrian only.
Okay, thank you.
You don't, I thought it was gonna be automobile only. Electric vehicles only.
Rollers only.
Okay, so there are other questions for the applicant? Are you coming up to make a quick clarification? Because we're going to go to the public hearing soon.
The application plan there, which is Z4, is the binding plan. And there it says it's a 10-foot class A type 2 pedestrian bike connection in this general area, which is indicating the
Yes,
dark
illustrative.
brown connection
Illustrative
point.
has no legal.
The Z5 is the illustrative plan,
Right.
and that does say
Yeah.
pedestrian bike only connection as well on it.
The Z5 is not binding because it's only
No,
illustrative.
it does say bike.
Yes.
Right? Yeah,
Yes,
you're
sir.
right. I didn't
Yeah,
see that.
I didn't either.
I couldn't read
was
it.
Right at the
Sorry.
end. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, that's my
Type
bad.
two
It's just-
pedestrian. Yeah, on Z4, they have the bike.
Z4 is the binding plan.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
It does.
I think we got it. You want a question for the applicant?
Yes.
Okay,
just
go
one
ahead.
Real quick. I appreciate your consideration of walkability in this. And just one other suggestion, question is what key concept in walkability is the ability to walk to services. And have you considered any, things like being able to walk to a coffee shop or being able to walk to a restaurant or to a school, or have you considered any types of local businesses that you could integrate within the development that could serve the local community?
Well, we're 0.7 mile from Hollymead Town Center, literally, so you can walk there in 10 minutes. So no, this is purely residential, not mixed use. We're so close to all the services that would be needed. I don't think that's in Breeden's plan.
Okay. All right, Corey.
Sure, it's one quick question about the schools and capacity. I think right now with the request, I was looking at my notes, 55 students would be added across the 3 levels of schools. If this was done accordance to, I guess, like the by right density, do you know about what that number would be?
The number would be 18 fewer than what
18.
what we would have here
Okay,
with the revised plan. I can show you that exactly, Mr. Claiborne.
I might have missed it in the notes, but I'm good.
It was just the.
Okay, that's fine. You don't have to necessarily bring up a slide of that. We wrote it down.
Yeah, it's so the number of students that would attend school in the current approved housing mix, if it were fully built out, would be 51 more students. And what we're proposing with our mix is 69. So across phase 1 and phase 2, that's an increase of 18 students over the entire plan.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other, thank you. Are there any other questions for the applicant? You had clarification? Yes.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I just wanted to clarify a few things. So on the initial application that was made with the initial rezoning, there were a total of 94 multifamily units. So they were part of that initial application plan. All unit types were included. And if
Right.
you think
A
about it, that
diversity
is
of-
one of the main principles of the neighborhood model, is this mixture of housing types. So as was stated by Commissioner Bivens, what we have here is basically 2 separate projects. So I think that was one of the things that was really attractive with the initial application, was this integrated mix of units throughout all phases, sprinkled throughout. And I think that vehicular connection was not necessarily from getting from point A to point B. It was about integrating the 2 phases from just a design standpoint of making the 2 phases feel like one community. And so that was something that staff really valued with it. Last, I will say there was a comment also made about the capacity analysis that was recently done with the comprehensive plan. We ran 3 separate scenarios. This was presented to the commission recently. All 3 scenarios, one being max build out, one being historical trends, and then another one being the by right, all had capacity within the development area. They get tighter as you go down numbers, but none of them showed that we were not going to be able to meet the demand.
Thank you. All right, I think we're ready. Thank you, Ms. Schweller.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and hear comments from the public now. Is there anyone from the public in the audience who would like to speak? Yes, please come forward. I'm sorry, sometimes it's hard to see over all of these gizmos. Yeah, I'm short. He keeps rising this. All right. You want to pull the microphone down towards you. Just state your name.
Okay, my name is Mary Ellen Isaacson. I live on Bayberry Way. My house backs up to the empty land where the second phase would be going.
Okay.
And in fact, according to these maps, I've seen my lot in multiple of these maps. So my lot would be back up to the proposed pond. We've lived there about 6 years, and we were happy to hear that there would also be some single family homes behind us. The density of the housing was supposed to get more dense as it went towards Dickerson Road. I'm not real happy to find that there will be such high density right behind my house. Also, from a traffic standpoint, it is very difficult to get from Town Center Drive to turn onto Dickerson Road in the mornings. It backs up quite a bit because of traffic on Dickerson Road. And I don't know if that's been taken into any consideration. Walkability, I don't think the residents would have any problem getting to Hollymead Town Center. But as to your point of being able to walk to and from the airport, there are no sidewalks on Dickerson Road. You would have to walk on Dickerson Road. And I don't know anybody that would want to do that. I can walk from my house to the airport. I've done it 15 minutes from my door to the terminal. It's fabulous, but you have to have sidewalks. I would not attempt it without. Part of my concern is the height. Single family homes aren't tremendously high. So the ones right behind me, I didn't assume would be very tall because there is a creek that runs between Deerwood and Willow Glen. So obviously the land from Deerwood slopes down and then it slopes back up the hill. So if there are these tall buildings right across, that's definitely going to change the character of the people that live in Deerwood looking at that community. We were expecting to look at mostly single-family homes right behind us. So I think that was all I had to say. But thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the public in the audience? Yes. I definitely couldn't see you behind that monitor.
Good evening, Neil Williamson with the Free Enterprise Forum. As an organization, we do not take positions on projects and we do not have a position on this project. I just want to call out this moment for you commissioners who will be working on the comprehensive plan. And this moment where you're adding 126 perhaps units to a greater than 10-acre parcel, and how that feels with the concerns you have. And the idea that the capacity analysis, even at the lowest number that was put forth, there'll be just enough land for us to get to 20 years. And how should we be planning the comprehensive plan, considering where you guys are at this moment with this application? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public that I can't see? Okay. Carolyn, is there anyone online who wish to comment on this application? Carolyn, I can't hear you. Is there anyone online?
Shoot. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. There's two people online.
Okay.
The first one is Carolyn, not me. Carolyn, please state your name and address. And if you're affiliated with a group, you have 3 minutes and your time starts when you start speaking.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Carolyn Burnett. I am a current resident since 2015 of the first phase of Willow Glen. And my concern that I wanted to speak about today is just in support of removing the vehicular connection between the two neighborhoods. This is a key aspect of what makes the application keep from materially changing the quality and safety of the lives and the people in the existing Willow Glen neighborhood. I don't know how many of you have spent any time in Willow Glen, but it is comprised of high number of very young families, young children playing in the street all the time. The width of Shannon Glen is, there's a significant number of residents who must park on the street in order to contain the vehicles that they have. Not all of them have garages. And so there are always cars parked on both sides of that road. There is not enough room for 2 lanes of traffic to pass through those cars that are parked on the side safely. And so as it stands now, even with only the dead end traffic from this very small neighborhood, it already is a place where it can get snarled up. That being said, to be dwarfed by not only what was expected, but an additional 126 units of traffic would become a significant safety issue for the children in this neighborhood and significantly impact our quality of life. Finally, at rush hour traffic on Town Center Drive headed toward Dickinson frequently backs up past the neighborhood entrance. If there were a vehicular connection through the two neighborhoods, it would encourage people stuck in that traffic already waiting at the entrance of that neighborhood to try to pass through both of the residential communities if they're going in that right direction, to not have to wait out the significant delay at that stop sign, creating further traffic than just the residential density and further concern for safety. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Kate.
Hi, yes, thank you. And good evening, I'm Kate Elwood. I live in Willow Glen Phase 1, and I'm the mother of a 7-year-old. I've lived in this neighborhood for 5 years, and Avery was about 2.5 years old when we moved here. And when we moved in, and still there's not much green space. Children playing in the street is because there's nowhere else for them to play. We don't have open green spaces for the kids to play. So playing in our streets is like second nature to these kids, and they do it safely. If you spend time here in our neighborhood, you'll hear kids yelling car anytime they see a car, and having more than 5 cars entering the neighborhood at one time is overwhelming to the kids enough. I can't imagine having 300 cars coming through our neighborhood. The kids are very aware already of their lack of play space in this neighborhood, and they've adjusted to this way of living. They kick balls, set up bounce houses in the streets, and play basketball. Taking away a safe space is like taking away a part of their childhood, and it will increase their anxiety and add to mental health issues. Studies have been shown that taking a street that is a cul-de-sac or a dead-end street and turning it into a throughway street does cause and increase anxiety in children. I hope that, I didn't hear anything mentioned about children tonight from the commissioners, from the board, and I hope that we can be as concerned about vegetation around the pond and the geese's quality of life as we are our children. This is where our kids play, and it's important for us to have safety as our top priority. I read over the entire 29 master plan today, and some language that stuck out to me was, it is essential to respect and work with the terrain, and it should improve and access and ensure safety and quality of life. I heard someone mention that this would, connect the two communities, and if that couldn't be further from the truth, this will definitely divide the communities. Having cars going through heavy traffic will only cause a negative connotation associated with that other neighborhood. I'm definitely for the pedestrian and bike path, and I've actually lived in a community in Ohio where both the bike and the pedestrian path coexisted beautifully, and it was wonderful. So I really hope that you'll consider not just the impact of traffic, which there's already a huge component of that in the master plan. We should let that work itself out with everyone, the engineers who are working on different traffic patterns in town. It's, it's not going to be improved upon 300 cars going through a neighborhood. So I do hope that you'll take the children as your first priority and the safety and quality of life of the residents who already live here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn, does that conclude the folks online waiting to comment?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll end. I'll close the public hearing. Oh, actually, you get a chance to come back and make comments. Sorry.
Thank you. First, I want to focus on the comment about the vehicular connection. The vehicular connection is not needed to bind phase 1 and phase 2 together. In fact, I think it would do the opposite. I think as Ms. Elwood pointed out, George has actually built a playground for the phase 1 folks in phase 2 so that they would have some place for their children to go. That's why we have that little interim pedestrian trail. If we have a pedestrian connection between phase 1 and phase 2, all of the Willow Glen people can come into phase 1 throughout phase 1, the trails, the 3 tot lots, all of the amenities. This project provides far more amenities than the prior project does, more units, more affordable units, better stream protection, more and better amenities. The townhomes and the condos in the old project were also 3 stories, so it's not going to feel different to the neighbors. But most important of all, frankly, this site is not going to get built. This project is not going to get built with the millions of proffers. That's why it's been sitting there, and that's why Mr. Ray has tried for a dozen years to get this changed. When the proffer laws changed, he came again, and it's just not going to happen. So please don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. We're trying to do a great project here, and the existing project can't be built. So we want to provide a really good project that we think in many ways is superior to what exists now.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right.
We're happy to take any more questions if you have any.
Okay, I think we're good. I will just want to make one quick comment though. Just to again acknowledge the Planning Commission has no way to ascertain the financial viability of any project without any kind of pro forma statement. So we're not considering that. That you can make a statement about the proffers from before, making it cost prohibitive, but we cannot objectively evaluate that without a spreadsheet. So It's a statement, but we have no way to evaluate. So take that for what it's worth. But it's back to us for discussion, deliberation. We have a site that has changed it from a mix of different units to one type of unit. There is obviously single-family residences and townhouses. There's other types of units in the first phase that have been built. So, and this is objectively still part of the same development. It has a lot more density than the prior application. So I think it's, and you know, we've had some comments about whether it's, you know, putting tall buildings too close to the neighborhood. There is a big pond between some of those units and the neighborhood, so it's not necessarily right up against it. We've also heard that they will provide, you know, other amenities and play spaces for the children who are now playing in the roads due to lack of sufficient parkland nearby. So, you know, and we have been supportive of greater density in the development area. So, you know, the question is whether you feel like this is, to me, a quality development that provides enough additional or different types of benefits that it makes it worth it to you to allow them to come back with a, well, what's a radically different plan? It's still residential, but other than that, there's not much similarity. So that's kind of the layout of the issues. I didn't answer. I didn't tip the scales in one direction or the other, obviously, but that's sort of what I heard so far. And so I'd love to hear from the commission. We still do not have a representative for the Rio district, so we have to do our best to represent their interests. Lonnie, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start to address the vehicular versus pedestrian connection.
Okay.
I'm full support of the pedestrian connection instead. I think the vehicular connection would not be an improvement.
Would not add much in terms of circulation
It
or,
would not add much, and I think it would provide a detriment.
okay. Do you have a perspective on the use itself, the going to the apartment building model?
I mean, I think that we have a shortage of that particular housing type. So I'm glad to see more apartments. I don't know that it needs to be all apartments.
Right.
But I'm glad to see more apartments.
In general, in the urban area. Okay.
I mean, I'm more of a fan of mixed use. I hate to see just a whole bunch of houses in one spot with no
Diversity, yeah.
diversity. I mean, I'll leave my comments to that for now.
Okay, sure. Mr. Claymore.
I'll share a couple of positives and things that are concerning to me. So
Okay.
on the positive side, I don't have any issue with the density. And I agree with Commissioner Lonnie about the pedestrian. I couldn't think of your last name for a second.
It's okay.
The pedestrian bike path, I think that's certainly the most appropriate way to connect the site. So I think those are two things that are okay for me.
Okay.
The lack of diversity in housing, to me, that was just very disappointing. And I think it'd be nice to have opportunities for home ownership within that area as well. There was no impact, we no longer address the impacts to the schools. That was kind of just like glossed over. So I found that to be a little problematic for me. And then if we're talking about kids running around, and we're very concerned about that. Well, the site plan looks like 12 buildings in a sea of asphalt.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't really take that into consideration either. So those are the three things that I'm really tussling with on this one. So, yeah,
Right. We'll continue to tussle.
yeah.
We'll just go this way, if that's okay, Mr. Bivens. We can
Sure,
go
no,
next.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, people have heard me speak to the whole idea that we have lots of communities that like Ballards. We're still a ballarded community, of which I am firmly against. And so I understand why, and I've heard the passion about why they want to have their children be able to play in the street. I actually had this whole image of people playing stickball on the street and yelling, car, 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 as they used to do at certain parts of our country. And so maybe we're going back to stickball in the streets, but perhaps not there. So that piece, while I can appreciate it, I also think that there is a real need in our community to be able to connect communities and to integrate communities with those kinds of connections. I'm struggling with, I thought the original concept plan that's on page Z2 worked well. I thought it worked well. I thought you get the kind of density you needed. You might need to change some of the condominiums out for, or some of the townhomes or whichever the structures are for multifamily to sort of, to increase the depth, to increase the density there. But I thought for this community, that worked well with some shading of structure type. I have to frankly say that, and you know, I'm the density guy. Give me tall buildings and I'm a happy guy. Give me a building that's got some height to it. And I actually like them, but I appreciate we're near the flight path, although that's not part of the flight path there. So, because there isn't one, it comes further to the west from there. So we're near the airport. And so I can appreciate there's probably some limits on height there. But I have to say that I think this is a better plan. I think what they presented 2005 is a better plan. Now, that doesn't get us to the fact that what are we asking for? What are they asking for now? They're asking for density. I get that, and I can appreciate that. They're saying all of it's going to be rental, so they're asking, so we don't need to push any money to the county to be able to be able to buy, to basically buy out a non-affordability or the affordability factor there. Okay, I get that. But and you know, this is the thing that I said early on, maybe I should be on the ARB instead of on the planning commission. I just don't think it's the right use for that plan, for that land. This is, if you're asking me, this was the plan, this worked. The plan that's being presented to us for all the return on investment arguments that I'm sure we'll hear at some point in time. I get it, but I don't know that that's actually, for me at least, enough for me to give a yes. Plus, I will go back. You may get a yes on that, but I can't vote yes. It doesn't matter whether or not I do, because I think there's enough votes for the bike pad. But I think we as a community need to get away from always solving connectivity with ballards. I can't support that. And I actually don't think, while I appreciate the applicants giving us some sidewalks on Dickerson Road, I think that's a gift that's not going to mean anything in the near future, or not even in the near future, in the future, because unless they can buy out the piece of property, the Ms. Perry property, and then they can buy out the two pieces of property that go up to the circle where the airport is, there's never going to be an opportunity to put a sidewalk from there to anywhere. So while it's nice, I just don't know what the value of that sidewalk on Dickerson is, the offer for a sidewalk on Dickerson is at this point in time.
Okay.
So early on, I actually, and I agree with my colleagues in density, and there are certain areas that are very appropriate. And I was a little concerned about this because of the scale around it. So there was a lot of single family homes. I actually think that this development has done a good job of trying to buffer and mitigate that. So there's not a lot of places where they're coming close. I think there may be a few in B9, B10, but you're seeing the narrow part of the building. And so I think in general, they've done a good job of mitigating that. I do agree with the comments that were made earlier about trying to create more green, and even if it comes in the cost of parking. Now, I know that you have to balance that, right? You have to have enough parking. You also don't want to have, but looking at opportunities to create more green and more of that pedestrian bicycle interactions. I would propose that actually a road would actually serve to separate the communities more. I don't think that it's just because we have a street that doesn't necessarily connect people. If you have walking paths, bike paths, then I think that would integrate the communities much more, because they would start to see each other and talk to each other. They're not going to talk to each other in a car. And so, unless they're honking at each other. And
Well, so, get out the way.
Get out the way, right?
Get out the way.
So I do think that there's a much better opportunity to think about how we create those walking paths and more opportunities for them, more buffers, less asphalt if possible. So I would encourage that, and I think both Mr. Misso and I did not see, it does say bike. It is all one word, pedestrian bike. And so we
On
could,
Z4.
they both say the same thing. I could even Z5 says it. It's just all one word. So it's really hard to see. But yes, it actually does say that. And so I would just encourage the development of that and really think about how that works so that both parcels, feel that that's part of their amendment. I think that was mentioned. And that would do more to bring people together so that people have that opportunity to meet each other and see each other. And so I do think there is a lot of promise to this development. Right now I'm not opposed. To
Not opposed.
the new
Okay.
proposed.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I
'cause
am not
was-
opposed to the new proposal.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll be going to my optometrist the next few days to make sure I can read these. So a few things. One, and I don't want to repeat what's already been said in the interest of time. One, just the use, yes, diversity would be best, right? However, I think in this case, and I think what we need to keep in mind in the future is balancing that ability to gain density within the development area with what is part of the larger regional context. And so I think, and I think the applicant actually mentioned this is, yes, a single use. However, it is within a field of a lot of other diverse scale. So I think that that's an appropriate way and something we need to keep in mind moving forward. I think, in terms of density, for me, sort of density, open space, parking are all kind of linked, and that's all kind of been discussed. I think ideally, the density is the right choice in this location to increase the density. I think if you're going to do that, adding that balance of open space, like we talked about with trying to reduce parking, but I get it. Been there, done that. Sometimes you can't, and sometimes that backfires, but maybe strategically thinking about where that could be located to enhance the open space. Affordable housing, I think that's commendable and appreciated. I think in terms of the circulation interconnectivity piece, I agree with my colleagues. I think there's a way to do interconnectivity with vehicles correctly. And I think unfortunately, this would be a way to do it incorrectly, right? I think you're forcing that. However, I do support interconnecting streets as a general principle, when done right and when it can be done safely. I don't think that would actually be the case here. So I also agree with my colleagues in terms of connecting with the bike ped as the best way to approach that here. And then finally, just thinking about buffers, I mentioned that a little bit, thinking about the pond and how that can be used as an amenity as well, and trying to increase as much as possible the area around that pond, but also appreciating the fact that it does provide a buffer between the single family original phase and this phase. So I would be supportive as well.
Okay. Well, take the last word and then, although feel free to make more comments, but I struggle with this one because I still feel like we could get, I know you said it's a great proposal. I feel like it could be even better. I do think that the area around the pond, for example, could be widened in some way so that when you're there, you feel like you've kind of laid it out as a park. I mean, it's a stormwater pond and I've seen ponds designed to be beautiful amenities. But to back up some of that parking that's right along the edge so that you can weave a path through there and feel like you could make that loop, or you could feel like you were in the park and not just looking at a whole bunch of parking. In terms of the pathways and connectivity through, you've relegated the paths to the sides, right? You've got a buffer, and so I understand that, but it's actually nice to walk through the community rather than be relegated to the edge when you're taking a walk. And I have challenged other applicants in this chamber to try to think that, and I've seen them come back with a green thread through the development so that you're going through, seeing your neighbors, saying hello, not just kind of being stuck on this weird periphery path that doesn't go to your friend's house or whatever. So maybe think about that, because you could actually shift your buildings out and put the green thread through the middle. Then it would feel like it was going somewhere. In terms of the vehicular connection, I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who buy into a neighborhood that has a proposed connection And then when it comes forward, say, I don't want it, it's unfair, it's not right, because it was supposed to be there. But having said that, I also see, to me in this site, adding that vehicular connection doesn't really buy us much. It doesn't suddenly make the traffic less. It does, I mean, to the point of the neighbor saying that it's very narrow, and I've lived on plenty of streets that 2 cars could not pass. I live on one now. Every now and then someone loses a mirror. But in reality, I think if there was such a pain to go through that neighborhood, I would say I'm not driving that way because I always have to weave around children and cars parked in the road. So probably that problem would solve itself. But in this case, because the connectivity doesn't really gain us much in terms of travel time, and it doesn't really get you to somewhere unique that you can't get to another way, I don't see much of the point of the vehicular connection. I just wanted to be clear that I'm not opposed to making connections that were supposed to be made. So I think that the design could be improved, but I do look at the bigger picture, and I do believe that, we have a diversity of housing in the area. I do like the original design better. I will say that I think it's a better neighborhood. I think I'd rather live in the first phase than the second. But I'm not going to hang my hat on that and oppose this for that reason. So at this point, I'm leaning in support with the caveats already gave. So I guess my question to you at this hour is whether there's a commissioner who is ready to make a motion either in support of or oppose, either way, a motion for this property, or if you'd like to discuss it further some more, we certainly can. Yeah, please.
So, so we've got a bunch, we've got a number of things which are because there are the Richmond legislator says that you basically can't do anything to a program, to a plan that's been accepted. There are no sunset clauses on plans. Okay. And so as a result, I feel like I'm in this situation where originally phase 2 wasn't actually the dominant plan for these 3 pieces of property. Phase 2, what we're talking about right now. That's much more with the central green and the pavilion and all of it. It sort of is the thing. And sort of phase 1 was the thing actually that was sort of hung off of the community. And we're doing the reverse now. And so that's what's troubling me. And we're doing the reverse because this plan's been sitting out there for 15 years. And so as far as the use of land here, the first plan's phase 2, I think strikes all the right chords for me. This plan, yes, it's got more density, but it's a plan with more density, bravo, but it's not necessarily a plan that feels like a community.
Okay.
And that's the problem that I'm wrestling with. Sure, I say you want some more houses? There's more houses. Do you want a place that feels like at the front bit, it was sort of the anchor for these 2 phases? Well, we don't have that any longer. And maybe I should just be like the kids, that don't get what they want at Christmas and say, okay, I'm not getting that, but I'm getting this. And so there it is. And so that's what I'm wrestling with.
Sure.
Density is not enough when particular. Don't show me this then. Don't show me that. And then I'm okay.
To see that
Yeah,
because
but
that's what's,
I'm
that's
okay
currently what's approved, but anyway.
But when I see this, I want that.
Okay.
Just had one kind of a response, I guess, to that. One is number one, a lot of what we've been talking about is details of the plan, right? With it, which I think is important and it's good to convey. I think it's also that we're really focusing on the application plan as being the document that's the guiding principle. So a lot of what we've been talking about, although I will say, parking is shown adjacent to the lake in the application plan. So there are certain things that could be tweaked in green space and so on. The second thing is, I think, it's interesting, sort of as a big picture comment, I guess, when you think about, again, getting back to the need for housing, the need for affordable housing, the need for, and the wisdom of putting density in areas that are accepted, are able to accept it from an infrastructure standpoint. Even though we can't see the pro forma of the developer, I think we have to at least think of what will actually be built. And part of the reason that we've gotten 54% of total capacity in the county is, I believe, because the market's changed and because they haven't gotten to a point where they can build it and sell it, right? So if we feel like this is a development that can deliver the density, I think it's one of those things where we sort of have to, independent of the financing, rely on that. And then the last thing I'll mention is the first phase that was shown that we were referring back to. It was, I agree. I mean, it was from a design standpoint, had hierarchy, it had all those ticking all those boxes that this one doesn't necessarily tick. But there are also a lot of people that probably couldn't have afforded to live there that now can afford to live here.
Actually, I don't know that. We don't have any idea what the renter is gonna be here, because it's
We
all
can
rental.
I know we have to.
Yeah, so we, I mean, so that, I mean, that's fine to say,
Yeah,
but at one point, when this came 15 years ago, that was the application plan.
true,
So
different time.
I will sort of say, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But that's not true, because this was the application plan. And so this is what got passed 15 years ago,
Yeah,
which-
I'm not debating that. I'm just
which
saying
was,
that.
which is so I want to say, to come back at what we're saying here, I get this. I get
What are you
this-
pointing to?
the Z4.
The new plan.
The new plan.
I get that.
Yeah.
What I'm also saying is if we look at the quality of living in our community, that was a better place to live.
I'm not denying that.
And so
Yeah.
what you're asking me as a commissioner to do is to say, this is already approved. You could go build this right now, wouldn't even need to be here talking to us. They could go build this. They may not want to build it because of their performance.
Right.
I get that.
Right.
That's not my decision.
Sure.
What you are asking me to do, and this is the thing I said earlier, people come and ask us to say, believe my pro forma. What else, what us never seeing the pro forma. And so I'm making a decision based on them telling us this is more affordable for them to build.
Yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from on that
And
as
on this,
well.
and so we're really, and so let's also back up on the affordability. We're talking about 60 houses, maybe. Because it's based on what they build. Right? It's 20% of what they build.
Right.
So at the max, it'll be 60.
Right.
I'm not willing to give up that kind of, is this the place where we are creating for our future for 60 houses? Because I think there are other ways to do 60 housing. If that's what we're wanting to do. I think the county, forget us. Supervisors have other ways to get to that. But what I feel called to do is to make sure that when they have those discussions, that they have a place that feels like it's an inviting place for people to come and live and work at a place where we're, as far as the community is concerned, we're putting a lot of, shall I say, we are lifting up the northern part of the county in some significant ways. That did it, this doesn't. But
Yeah.
I get it.
No, and I
This-
agree,
this-
the
doesn't.
quality of the design, like I said, the hierarchy, the principles of design and livability in that space were much better in the original plan. I think the challenge is that balance of, right, would anything be built there?
Well, yeah,
And
we
it
like
is
plan
the-
one, but will it ever be
Yeah,
built?
exactly. And if it's not, and if we're truly looking to expand the portfolio of housing in Albemarle County,
This might
it's
be
a
the only
trade-off.
way you're gonna get it to.
It's a trade-off.
All right, are there any other comments or questions at this point, or questions of each other is fine? I mean, this is what we do. We deliberate, we change our minds.
But this is what we're doing.
I know, I've changed my mind a lot.
We're doing this. This is what we're doing.
Uh, Believe
Well,
it or
but-
not, I've changed it 7 times tonight. All right.
Fine.
But my role as chair is to see whether we're at a point where we're ready to make a decision.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So is someone on this commission prepared to make a motion, either for or against?
Go ahead, Fred. Yes, go ahead.
I'm prepared.
Go
I
ahead,
can have the
Commissioner.
cheat sheet.
Oh, the cheat sheet. Oh, and I was to thank staff for this.
Some
Are we allowed to
language.
do that, man?
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, because this really
Oh,
isn't,
you
it
read
was a
about it.
complicated,
Definitely.
I thought it was a complicated proposal.
Yeah. we can
And so
do that after this.
I want to thank our staff.
I'll do it during the discussion.
and do for
Yeah.
this. I'll be quiet.
Let him make his motion.
Okay, so I move that the planning commission recommend approval of ZMA 2021-1 Willow Glen for the reasons.
Right, that's good. That's good. Stated in the staff report.
Yeah, I've been stated in the staff report and those discussed today. I mean, there was quite a few. Do we need to make motions on the additional?
For the-
You did it one at a time, I believe.
Parking.
Yeah, individually.
That one?
Yeah, so you're just doing the first.
We'll do the exceptions first. Second.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, discussion. Or any new points or points you want to remake? All right, there's no further.
Well,
Yes, sir.
I
Go
do
ahead.
think we should craft some language to talk about at least creating additional buffers around the pond. And that proximity of the parking to the, I mean, it seems awfully narrow. I think that is an amenity that can, I mean, it's been stated by a number of people here, and I somehow think we should grasp that there should be some additional consideration for
It's tricky
increased
because,
buffers.
right, it's tricky because you can't be sure at this moment that they can shift everything. So you can't make it a requirement. You could do something like you encourage them to
Right.
make every effort to try to widen the green space between the pond and the parking.
And during site plan, they can certainly work.
Yeah,
on it.
yeah. So you can add that as language, but it's just not a condition.
And I would say that as represented on the application plan
There you go.
too, ties
There you
it back to the application. plan.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? I would also like to see if they can snake the green path through the development rather than just having it relegated to the edge. But again, that would be an additional design attempt, but not a condition. So if we could have that added into our record. All right, any other comments or further discussion? All right, let's call the roll, please.
Okay. Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Miss Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
No.
and Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne.
No.
Okay, so the vote passes to allow this change in layout, and we have then two other things we have to look at. I think one was the well, at least one, which was the vehicular connection. Is that correct?
Right. There's two exceptions.
There were two special exception requests. Vehicular access, I don't believe is one of them, but Mr. Reidelbach has put up on the screen suggested motions.
Yes, the first one was for modifying the recreational facilities from what's required in the zoning ordinance to what they propose. And then the second one was for the reduction in parking.
Okay, so one of the items I recall you saying at the very beginning was a special exception, is that right? I mean, there was the concern, the confusion around the fact that the planning commission doesn't actually have the authority. We could just make a recommendation.
That's correct.
So we don't actually have to take that up.
You do not. If the commission wishes to make a recommendation, it can. I know there have been past special exceptions that the commission has declined to make a recommendation one way or the other.
Yeah.
Streets.
Right, well, that, anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. We don't have to take it up, but there's two before us. Somebody want to make a motion on the first one?
I move that the planning commission recommend approval of special exceptions request SE 2021000007 to modify the requirements for recreational facilities associated with the Willow Glen development for the reasons stated in the staff report.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, Carolyn, call the roll, please.
Mr. Claiborne, Mr. Claiborne,
Carolyn?
Is there?
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
See that means she's there.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Miss Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Missile.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll pull up the second one, please. All right, the second one. Second special exception to recommend denial of, no, sorry. Parking. Okay, sorry.
This is this is for Louise because he likes parking. We like to reduce parking.
Yeah,
I want no parking.
yeah,
Okay.
I'll be glad to do this one.
Oh, and he's gonna do it. Go ahead.
I recommend the planning commission recommend approval of special exception request SE 2021-00008 to permit a reduction in the required number of parking spaces associated with the Willow Glen development. The reasons stated in the staff report.
There's a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Carolyn, could you call the roll? Are you just,
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Miss Firehawk,
aye?
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, so this moves forward to the Board of Supervisors at a date to be determined. Our recommendation is just that, a recommendation. So, thank you. All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And I think Mr. Bivens also wanted to recognize the excellent staff work
You're here.
in this
Yeah.
report for this very complicated application that he was able to get through,
Thank you. Thank you. Chief.
notwithstanding the needs of some commissioners for additional eye exams. All right. So with that, we'll give you a second if you want to clear the chamber, unless you would like to hear staff reports and committee meetings.
Council, what happened to the other council? Got her on.
All right. Commissioners, do we have any committee reports? We'll start at this end with you, Mr. Missile.
Sure. I attended the Agricultural Forestal District Committee. I think I mentioned that on the 9th. And in addition to the Kreitzer Hatton extension that we discussed earlier, we also discussed the Misty Mountain Camp Resort and the Crossroads Tavern and Inn staff report. The Misty Mountain staff report was to reconfigure the development of the campground. So that was not met with any concern. The Crossroads Tavern and Inn, I would just, without going into detail, recommend potentially listening to the discussion if you all have time to do that, because that will be coming to us, I'm sure, at a certain time. And it was very insightful, I think, the conversation
Okay,
relative to that and to the adjacent Pippin Hill
and
Farm.
that's for the Ag Forestal District
Correct.
meeting. Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
That's it.
Can we get a link to that? Can we get a link
To the meeting?
to the?
To the recording for the Ag Forestal District.
We meet in person now, so we no longer do Zoom meetings, so it is an
Oh, it's
in-person
not,
meeting.
it's not recorded?
Nope.
Do we have minutes?
There
It's
should be
not-
some light minutes, but it's not like they are for us, yeah.
Like,
Okay, well, how about this? If you go to the Agricultural Forestal District website, you can see the staff report for those.
okay,
I would give you that.
and then talk to you. Okay.
And may I ask just a point of clarification? Is this the project that we've been receiving?
Many emails about?
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you for
It's in my,
correcting.
it's in my district.
Correcting for like my language, because it wasn't going to be as kind as that.
Many communications have been made. Okay. Is that it? Okay.
Yes. thanks.
Louise, do you have one?
Yes, we did have an MPO meeting and I grabbed my wrong.
The wrong notebook. So
There was a lot of
so there's
discussion.
nothing there that you can report from.
And there was also there was a review of the VDOT,
Oh.
Read out what?
the smart scale
Oh, okay, the applications.
applications.
Okay,
So I'll give that next week in more detail.
okay, excellent. We shall look forward to it.
Oh, really?
All right, Mr. Bivens.
Pass.
I continue to mourn the lack of meetings of the Historic Preservation Committee of the county. We've now hit meeting number 4 with no meeting. Let us pray that we can one day get together. The challenge is that we can't change the meeting frequency or requirements for people to attend unless we have a meeting. And since we cannot have a meeting, we're unable to change our bylaws. So we're stuck in a vicious circle. Please, members, if you're out there, attend the meeting.
Attend one meeting. You just need them. to
Just
attend
come
one
to the meeting.
one meeting.
All right.
No report. No.
Want to go after that? Okay. Mr. Murray.
Okay, I attended the Crozet Community Advisory Committee. We had a great presentation from the Crozet Trails crew about the great work that they're doing. Also attended the Albemarle County Natural Heritage Committee meeting, where we talked about recommendations for an invasive species management plan with county parks. Particularly, there's an exceptional hemlock within Pretty Creek that we would like the county to take action to save that before it succumbs to woolly adelgid.
Okay.
Before it succumbs to what, please?
Hemlock woolly adelgid, which is a pest that eats the hemlock trees.
Yes, and there were also reports on from the education subcommittee, talking about various ways we can improve education of Albemarle County citizens. That's all.
Okay.
I could go on.
All right, I'm sure. And I would probably sit here all night and listen to you. But in the interest of time, we'll turn back to Mr. Rapp for the Board of Supervisors meeting reviews.
Thanks. So on the November 2nd meeting, the board did approve Southwood Phase 2. Been a long journey. Finally, that one is approved and moving forward. And in our at the last meeting last Wednesday, what day was it? The 16th, the board held public hearings for the Clifton Inn and Kalina Farm property. They actually voted to defer that until the next meeting, but had some lengthy discussion to kind of go over all the complicated arrangements of those two properties and how they'll be interacting. So that'll go back to the board at their next meeting.
I'm just curious, without you asking you to regurgitate the meeting,
Yeah.
what was the general reasons for the deferment?
Supervisor Price was not in attendance and it was in her district.
Oh, okay, that's right. That's right. So she couldn't weigh in.
Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you.
May I ask a question of our of our director?
Sure.
I was going to color that, but I decided not yet. Was there a solution about school property in the Southwood community? Did they come to some resolution about property? For
There
school?
was, in terms of the price of the school property, it was set at a max price.
And that was higher than zero?
It was. Trying to think of what the actual number was. I want to say $680,000, something around that range.
That's correct.
For the property?
And then the other aspect of that is that if the school chooses not to take advantage of that, that it'll be dedicated to affordable housing. That was the other part of the
I
school
believe
site.
a minimum of 20 additional affordable units within the development. I believe it's 20, a minimum of 20 more additional affordable units, if we choose not to purchase it.
I'm just curious in your body language there, were you suggesting that you prefer 20 units of affordable housing to a school for kids to walk to?
Here's what I would say. I would prefer.
I mean, it's not up to us. I'm
No,
just
no, it's not up
curious.
to us. What I would have hoped is that the community would have offered the county a zero cost for that land. Because a school there would help the entire community in ways that I can't even begin to articulate. I could, but I also want us to get out of here. And so I thought that given the amount of support that has come from both the community writ large and Albemarle County, I thought that that was a project that should have offered up land for both the school and perhaps a footprint for the Boys and Girls Club to share that space. I thought that would have been an appropriate way to sort of engage with the community.
I agree with you completely. I just wanted to hear that out loud. Thank you. Okay. All right, any new business? I'll be crying at the end of the year because Mr. Rapp will no longer be sitting on this side of the dais.
Oh, wait, is he gonna
He'll
sit?
be in the audience,
Oh, no, he
maybe.
can't come in. No, I think it's like any corporation. When you leave a corporation under dubious circumstances.
Well, I made sure to guarantee that our last meeting together is a lengthy one, so you'll be prepared for next Tuesday. We'll be here for hours and hours.
I will have a plane to catch at 4 a.m., just to let you know. So I will be.
Go right from here to the
leaving that tree,
airport.
No matter what happens. I will be going to the airport
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good
regardless of how long the meeting goes on. I will pass the baton at 4 a.m. All right,
to you.
all right. So no old business, no more business.
No business.
All right, no items for follow-up? Say no. Okay, great.
Mhm.
All right, so we are going to adjourn to our next meeting, Tuesday, November 29th, 2022. And that is the meeting for which we also have a work session starting at 4 o'clock, right?
No.
We don't, it's
No work
6.
session. Yep. 6 o'clock, the work session won't be until your December 13th meeting.
Oh, December 13th. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
To midnight.
If you remember, this meeting tonight and the next one were different dates than we had initially set because we moved
Right.
around with the holiday
Yes.
and things like that and with the election day. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Meeting adjourned to November 29th.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, y'all.
Only Neil.